The day before Thanksgiving in 1971, a man identifying himself as Dan Cooper bought a plane ticket from Portland to Seattle. He hijacked the plane, claiming he had a bomb in his briefcase, and demanded $200,000 and 4 parachutes. He jumped out of the plane with the money and the bomb somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, never to be seen again. The FBI claims to have investigated over 1,000 people, including dozens of deathbed confessions. In 2016, 45 years after the hijacking, the FBI suspended its investigation of the case. While the FBI is no longer looking for D.B. Cooper, there is a community of people who are trying to solve the case on their own. Welcome to the Cooper Vortex. In this episode, we're lucky to be joined by a very sharp lawyer from Jackson, Mississippi. A graduate of Ole Miss, a former assistant district attorney and current criminal attorney, this dude, like most of my guests, had a passing interest in D.B. Cooper, but now he's too deep in the vortex to escape. I'm sure glad this guy got sucked into the vortex because he's straight up getting after it. Enjoy this episode with my good friend, Ryan Burns. All right, Ryan, when was the first time you heard about D.B. Cooper?
Probably on the History Channel when I was growing up. That'd be my guess. Probably a rerun of In Search Of. You know, I was obsessed when I was a kid with Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and all that type stuff, and a lot of that comes from watching In Search Of and Nimoy. So it was either In Search Of or it was The Unsolved Mysteries. It was one of those things. And being a little nerd kid that I was, I probably would have, I don't know what books even existed on Cooper. I guess Norjack existed back in the 80s, 90s, but I don't know of any other, I mean, there might have been, but I don't know of any other Cooper books that you would have found that I would have found in the library. Just In Search Of, I guess, looking at, Nimoy and this cool dude, but I didn't really, that was when I first heard of it, but I didn't really get into it until I was in law school. I think, and it's weird, I can't remember certain details of my life. I can name all the presidents, but I can't remember what happened last week. So I have that kind of mind, right? And so, but I think I remember being in law school and something spurred me to start Googling Cooper. And my guess is that it was Larry Carr coming out with the information about the tie and the parachute and so on. So all his info dump he did, basically. I probably saw that, and instead of listening in my law classes, I would have spent the time Googling Cooper. I think I know I made my way to Drop Zone around that time, and I never posted until about 2015 or so. And even then, I didn't post much. But I just remember reading Blevins and all these people. Joe, obviously, was back then. Joe was an interesting character, but I just lurked for a long time. But that's what it was. It was in law school when I got into it, and just kind of became, I think most people in the vortex are ADHD maniacs, and I'm certainly that guy too.
I think my trajectory with Cooper is very similar to yours in that, I heard about it as a kid. It was a local story where I lived, so I had some passing interest in it. And then I'd been on the Drop Zone as a lurker on the D.B. Cooper forum when that came up a few years later as a lurker. And then, I didn't post anything until I started the show.
Wow. Yeah, I think that sounds about right for me. I've only started posting really in the past few months, even though I've been doing this for 15 years now, probably reading about it. I mean, all the time, always on the Drop Zone, and then Cooper Forum, and then Bruce Smith, Uncle Bruce, sent me a copy of. I corresponded with him a few times, just randomly. He sent me a copy of D.B. Cooper and the FBI, which is to me, I tell people that's the Bible. That's the definitive book on Cooper. If you need, I agree. It's perfect. And people have some issues with him sometimes, but his research is solid on Cooper. It's as solid as it gets. But I wasn't into it. I didn't post until recently, and I was just thinking, well, I'm a big boy. I can participate in this. It's weird. I there's such big personalities, on the Drop Zone, and I didn't want to get yelled at by Joe or somebody, so I just didn't post, Blevins and these people, and because I certainly had a lot of opinions about these people, about the suspects in the case, especially my when I got into, I was an assistant district attorney, and when I got into, I guess, prosecuting, dealing with criminal law, I'm involved in criminal law right now. I'm a criminal defense attorney now, and so when I was in law school, I liked the criminal stuff, and so that element of it. But and I've heard you mention too, I don't like true crime, and I don't like courtroom dramas. I don't like true crime because I don't need to be depressed. I've seen enough stuff prosecuting crimes and defending crimes. I've seen enough actual crime scene photos and things that I don't want to go home and watch that. Just like I don't want to go home and watch Law and Order or something. That's my day job. It's not my hobby.
Right.
My hobby is Cooper and other things. But so, yeah, I just got into it, I guess 2007, 2008. And so my trajectory was like yours. I decided to be a big boy eventually and started posting on my own and holding my own. But I was emailing people instead of posting on the forums. I was getting their emails and emailing them. I emailed Blevins, I think, and I emailed Bruce Smith, and I just emailed people privately.
I did the exact same thing.
Really?
Yes. I watched one of Blevins' YouTube videos and I emailed him, and he emailed me right back.
Yeah.
And it was perfectly nice. And same thing with Bruce. Like I read his book and his email was in the back of the book, I think.
Yep, it is.
And I was like, I have these 3 questions. I loved the book. And he got back to me right away. And I was like, wow, these guys are pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, again, when you have you just want to talk to people about it, and that's why your podcast is so great. I mean, I could literally talk about this for 12 hours in a row if I had to. But I think the great thing about Cooper is that because he existed for 5 hours, it's not like taking on a subject. It's not like, World War II or something, I mean, that it's so large of a topic. Cooper can be really, I think it fits really perfectly for the ADHD, OCD mind, because you can learn a whole lot about it really quickly and somewhat become an expert on it really quickly, because there's not a lot there really, if you think about it. I mean, there is, but we're getting a lot more now with the FBI files, but and I think that that's what just the fact that there wasn't a lot there led people to go read things online, because there are because it was an active case for so long. The narrative was completely promoted by the FBI. It was just what they wanted to tell us, basically, is what we knew. Because when you've got people who the main participants are hermits, essentially, or hiding away. And I don't want to say that Tina was hiding away, but she wasn't vocal about it. So, and really, who was impacted by this? There's nobody out screaming for justice. Cooper ruined me or killed my husband or something.
An airline and an insurance company were the victims of this crime.
That's right.
Does anyone feel bad for either of those companies?
Never. They've got money and we don't.
I think that's really well said, that it's not like World War II. This took place over 5 hours, but World War II is a great story. The DB Cooper story, we don't know the beginning of that story and we don't know the end of that story. We only got the middle piece. And so it's like you have this incredible heist and you want to know a little bit more about it. Who did this? What happened? Where did that go? Where did he go? And you don't have any of that information.
No, and it's very frustrating. And so I think for seekers of knowledge, I think people who are hobbyists, which means that we look for knowledge's sake. We just like being smarter about certain subjects, and it's like, dad gum, I want to know so badly who this person was, because damn, he's cool, and I hate to say that about a criminal, but I mean, golly, he's and I think that's what it really speaks to a lot of people, is just the cool element of it. I mean, if he had done this in overalls, I don't think it'd be as cool.
Definitely not.
No.
And he's just the image of him sitting in the back in a suit and Tina's lighting his cigarette while he's drinking bourbon and soda. It's
the ultimate dude thing. It's the dude. I mean, gosh, and it sounds so ugly and crude in a way, but it's the coolest crime that's ever been committed as far as the cool factor goes.
I agree.
And now if somebody had been truly hurt, it wouldn't be quite as cool. Obviously, it wouldn't be cool at all. But I think because he got away with it, and because just the fashion in the time period with the sexy stews, that whole element of it is really cool. And I think that really speaks to a lot of men. And I know you've mentioned in the podcast what speaks to this about men, why so many men are interested in Cooper as opposed to females, whereas females are interested in true crime. And I think, I mean, females might be the top consumer of probably true crime podcasts and things.
I have a couple of friends that do true crime podcasts, and they say their audience tends to be 60 to 75% female.
Golly.
And my audience, I would say, is at least 90% male.
Yeah, and that checks out because women like, it's my experience that women watch, like, back in the 90s, watch Dateline, and those type shows more. And so I don't know what it is, but yeah, maybe females like true crime more for whatever reason. But with Cooper,
this is true crime, isn't it?
It is, but it's not. I don't know. There's something missing. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but it's the coolest crime ever committed. And he was the coolest criminal, and it sounds like fanboyish, but it's. I mean, and so because this guy is so interesting and neat, who the hell was he? Was he James Bond? Jason Bourne type guy, right? So who was he? So that's what draws you to it is, we all want to solve something, and I think we like mysteries, and it seems so close to being. It seems like you could be the one to figure it out. It seems like maybe because it's the only mystery that really seems like it could be solved by just sitting in your chair.
But it's been almost 51 years now.
Yep. And but I would say, though, here's the thing, though, when people point out that it's been so many years, well, yeah, but what did anybody have to work with who was trying to investigate this in the year 2000, right? They didn't have the FBI files. They didn't even know about the tie. Well, I mean, I believe the tie was first mentioned. I believe Dave on the Cooper Facebook page found the first reference to the tie, which was in the Rhodes book, or I believe it was in the Real McCoy book. Okay. I think that's. And I found newspaper articles to that effect. It was about 1989 when they started promoting that book, and they started talking about the tie, because they were saying it was a BYU tie or something. But so I think that's the first time that the tie. But again, it speaks to how little we really knew about the thing until the internet age. I mean, this is the perfect internet age mystery, right? Because we can compile our research together and try to figure it out together, or by ourselves. You could be a lone wolf like Collins, who's been researching Weber, and not really. I mean, he's willing to share with people, but I don't think he stays out of the vortex, I think.
He definitely does.
Admirable, I guess, but it's not fun. It's not fun if you can't talk to people all the time and argue with people and watch. You listen to people argue for their suspects. It's cool. It's like a real community, and but it's the perfect internet. It's the perfect internet age mystery, I think.
When did you go from I'm just reading about this to I'm looking into my own thing? I want to find out more about this person's suspect.
Okay, so the first suspect that I got into was Braden. Like, that I was like, this makes sense to me. As a former prosecutor, and I actually wrote an email. I wrote an email to Drew Beeson right after he published that book, and I was like, wow. And I told him, and he messaged me the other day and said, hey, this email you sent was a real confidence boost to me. Because I told him, I said, hey, I'm a former prosecutor from Mississippi, and of all the suspects I've ever seen, Braden is the only one that could possibly be, that I would almost feel comfortable prosecuting just on circumstantial evidence alone.
Did you read his book?
Oh yeah, so I read his book, and I emailed him after that. So I was just like, wow, I call Braden the god of circumstantial evidence, because he really is. Whether or not he was Cooper, we don't know, but geez, I mean, how often do you get one of the greatest living skydivers who's also a criminal? I mean, a major criminal, and which he became after the hijacking. I mean, this guy spent the 70s and the 80s, committing, heists in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, I mean, geez, that really checks out, and his physical descriptions are the only thing that really throw him off a little bit. He's short, and his eye colors, But other than that, I don't know what else you could say about Braden to discount him.
That's it.
That's
you
it.
can't put him on the plane, but the rest of his life fits to a T.
To a T. He's a shady character who knew this could be done. And I mean, I think about a guy who literally parachuted into Laos, into the jungles. I mean, there are references. I found references from him recently where he was training ARVN, that's the army of the Vietnam, that's the South Vietnamese army. He was training their special forces how to land into trees. He was teaching them how to land into the mountainous wooded area of the Central Highlands. And I mean, so he knew how to do this so easily. So to have a guy who was one of the greatest living skydivers at the time, who was angry at his lot in life at the time because he had been kicked out of the army, the only thing he knew how to do, he was driving a truck, which can't be stimulating to an adrenaline junkie like him.
Right.
I mean, this is a guy who volunteered to be, with the MACV-SOGs and with Project Delta in Vietnam. He was bored being on the parachute demonstration team. The Golden Arrows, for those who don't know, is like the Blue Angels for the Army parachuters. They're Army parachutists, and they were touring Europe. Ted was touring Europe in the early '60s, and then all of a sudden he's like, you know what? I'm bored. I'm gonna go check out. I'm gonna go to Vietnam and fight in combat. And he was there for 2 years, fighting in. He got a little weird there at the end. I think he had been in the army. You read other guys talk about him. He had been in the country too long. He got a little combat took its toll, and I compare him to like Sergeant Barnes in Platoon. He's like a little. He's been in country too long, and needs to. He needed to check out. But there's just so much weird stuff about Braden. So Braden's the one that I was like, golly, this guy checks out, because the other suspects just didn't do it for me. So I emailed Drew, and he emailed back and said, "Oh, thank you so much." And I actually came across. I post on a sports message board for football, and I actually started a DB Cooper thread there. And there was actually an old MACV-SOG guy who posts there years ago. And he actually posted, he said, yeah, I remember when I came back from Vietnam, it was in early '72 and I was still doing jumping. I was still skydiving stuff, doing stuff. And FBI agents came and talked to me and a couple other guys about Ted Braden, which is interesting.
In '72?
Yeah. He said it was early '72. He said, and this guy's legit. He is who he says he is. So he said it was early '72. He was in North Carolina doing skydiving, and the FBI showed up and talked to him about Braden. And he said he didn't know really what was about because Braden was before his time in Vietnam. But he said, I never met Braden. All I know is that he was a badass, basically, and that other people in the special forces that I knew thought he was Cooper. And that was good enough for him to think he was Cooper, right? But he didn't really know what it was about at the time. So, and what's interesting too is about Ted Braden is that as we go through these FBI files, I don't think we're even going to find much about Braden in there because MACV-SOG was classified, right? And I believe that anything classified, it doesn't end up in the 302s. So I believe that Larry may have said that what's things that are classified weren't put in 302s. So MACV-SOG was classified. So any discussions about Braden was going to MACV-SOG was going to be brought up at the time. So I don't know if anything's going to be in the 302s about Braden.
That's interesting because that probably excludes some interviews with some other MACV-SOG members that we haven't heard that were considered suspects by the FBI at the time.
Exactly. So I don't think any 302s are going to mention MACV-SOG, in my opinion, especially ones from back then. But so that, and I sent Drew that. I said, hey, this is a guy who said he was interviewed about Braden in '72. And it all checked out. So Braden was what I got interested to, and I researched Braden. I started doing some research on Braden, and I shared my information with Drew. I'm not convinced Braden is Cooper, but he's as good as anybody. He's the best. To me, Ted Braden is the best named suspect out there for sure.
Who's the worst named suspect out there?
Walter Recca. I will try to be polite, because I do believe that the people who brought about his story are earnest in their belief that it's legit, as all these other people are. Gosh, man, I mean, he was basically, to me, he was cosplaying as a special agent. I don't believe he was ever a special agent. I think that was a fantasy in his head. I mean, we have these KGB IDs allegedly, right? And you look at them, and the KGB ID says Walter Recca on it. Okay, well, if you're some double, triple agent, are you going to use your real name? Come on. I mean, Comrade Recca is not legit in my opinion. So, no, not at all. I mean, but the thing is, Recca's one of these guys who had a good military career. I mean, he was a para jumper, a rescue jumper. He had the capability, and that's genuine. That's not made up. That's real on him, right? But it seems like that wasn't good enough. And maybe he's a guy who never saw combat. I don't think he did. And so maybe some of these guys who never saw combat want to embellish their stories. You see that with stolen valor type stuff these days, right? Where, even guys who are in the military will say they did these things, right? So Recca, and then you have Recca saying that he went out the side door. He was, going out the side door, and Tino was like, "Oh, don't jump out that way, jump out this way," and then ending up on the wrong side of the mountains. It's outrageous to me that he was ever a legitimate suspect to get so much wrong that we know is right. I mean, we can argue about flight path and stuff, but geez, he may as well have been jumping in Idaho. It's from where Cooper jumped. It's insane. So no, I'm not a fan of Recca. Recca looks like Larry Carr, and Larry Carr does not look like DB Cooper. He has spiky blonde hair, and so I guess if he was some double, triple, if Recca's legit, then he's the only person who was ever a quadruple agent for CIA, Mossad, OSS, and KGB. It's like, well, come on, he's not Jason Bourne. And besides, if you want to look at a guy who actually did work for the CIA, you look at Ted Braden and look at how mysterious he is. You can look him up and find nothing on him. Well, I Google Recca, and Recca was in the white pages. His address, home address. You're not some super secret agent, Comrade Recca, living in wherever he was from. I can rant about Recca, but I'll be polite.
No, I think that's well said. That's an interesting way to look at it, that he's cosplaying that, and I could see that.
It's just he was cosplaying before it was cool. Is the
Right.
way to say it. Is the modern way to say it. It just,
and I suppose like a man of a certain age, if you're sitting around with your buddies, you could say something wild, and it's not like they can fact check you that second.
No.
If you tell me you were the state wrestling champion last year, I can actually look that up and be like, right, Ryan, you were lying. You weren't the state champion.
Right. Yeah. And so, I think too, with war stories too, people like to tell war stories, and I think that's part of maybe culture. Down at the VFW, everybody's, it reminds me of like Cotton Hill and King of the Hill, right? He was at D-Day, but he was also at Iwo Jima. It's like, well, you couldn't be at both places, so it's like, it kind of reminds me of that. But no, Recca looks nothing like Cooper. He behaves nothing like Cooper. It's just, no, he's bad.
I assume you watched the Netflix documentary.
Yes, I did.
What did you think of it?
More rack straw stuff. I'm a bit upset that the History Channel documentary from 2016 and now the Netflix documentary spend 70% of their time. That might be conservative. Both of those documentaries combined spend 70% of the time talking about a suspect who is not a good suspect.
And then both shows end disputing the claim that he's Cooper.
Yeah. So it's like, what are we doing here? What's the point of this? And again, Rackstraw, just way too young, way too young. There is a picture of him from October of 71, and he looks like a beautiful man with flowing hair. He's tan, and he had just come back from Vietnam, right?
Yeah, and I think there's evidence he had a mustache from like 69 to 72, and
yeah, it's just, come on. And again, one thing about eyewitnesses, and in my experience doing criminal law, eyewitnesses are difficult. They're problematic is the way to put it. The gun always looks way bigger describing it than it really was, right? The knife that somebody pulled on somebody was a machete when it was actually a pocket knife. our brains go to places when we are in fear. It's some kind of caveman thing, I guess, where it's just like, I'm being harmed by this thing that I can't protect myself from, right? So I think eyewitnesses distort things, and I believe that's why the FBI liked Bill Mitchell so much, is that he wasn't afraid. He was just jealous, I guess, of the attention, right? He wasn't
I
scared.
agree. I think his interpretation, because he made a note of the guy, like,
Yeah,
why is she with that loser?
yeah,
Geeky old guys.
Just geeky old man. Yeah, he told him a geeky old man who with greasy, ugly, awful hair. Well, Rackstraw had nice looking hair, and and they can say, well, he was disguised and everything, but come on. I mean, even through it, I don't know. Tina sat next to him for hours and hours and hours, and Rackstraw would have been 5 or 6 years older than her. I mean, they were basically contemporaries in age, and I go back to this a lot, is that the very first impression we have of D.B. Cooper's age comes from Florence Schaffner when she goes up to the cockpit and Bill tells her to sit her butt down and not leave the cockpit. They told Florence not to leave the cockpit. I think Florence had a rough time. If you read the 302s, Tina sees Florence trying to speak, and she can't. I mean, she's petrified of what's going on. She even dropped the note. She was so startled. And so Tina, that's what alerted Tina that something was wrong, was Flo's reaction. I think Flo didn't handle it well, which is okay. I mean, she was terrified. But Tina was brave. But Flo went to the cockpit, and we have her actual handwritten notes in her handwriting, and she writes, with D.B. Cooper sitting 80 feet away in his 50s for his age. She writes in his 50s. So the very first impression we have of D.B. Cooper's age is in his 50s. So anybody who thinks he's in his 30s or 20s, no way. Now, granted, men did look older back then. That's no doubt about that. You can look at pictures of people, they look
right,
older,
but those gals would have been used to it in that time. They're not saying, oh, yeah, right. Well, the people in 2020, they look a lot younger.
You're right.
She's saying this is what men look like.
Yeah, and she would know what a 50-year-old
man from 1971 looks like when he's 28 and when he's 48.
Yeah, exactly. And so Rackstraw is just, and again, Rackstraw was in custody. Okay, if Rackstraw was Cooper, it's the same argument with McCoy. If they could have pinned it on him, they would have.
Even if they had one thing that they could attempt to do it in trial, they would have done that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now this does come up where people will say, well, why didn't they just try somebody like that? Well, the reason why they never brought an indictment against anybody was because, and I can say this as a defense attorney, it would be the easiest case to defend if I was defending Rackstraw or McCoy or something like that, right? All you had to do was get Tina, Flo, Alice, Bill on the stand and say, was D.B. Cooper in this room? And they would go, no. And that'd be it, period. And, Tina and Bill, and that's the issue I have with McCoy, is that, we know from the FBI files that they, FedExed basically, images of McCoy right after he was captured to be shown to all 10 witnesses.
And an audio tape.
That's right. Yeah. Was it to the stewardess? Yeah. Was this the guy? Was his voice? He was a Southerner like me with a lisp, so not some, Midwestern, no accent having dude. McCoy was kind of a hick. He grew up in the sticks, and so no. And again, all 10 witnesses said that is not D.B. Cooper within days of McCoy being captured. And this is only within 6 months of Cooper. So, memories fade, but, in 6 months, maybe not, it's close enough in time for me to believe that they could identify whether a guy was Cooper or not when shown an image of this person. So, McCoy and Rackstraw, they would be easy people to defend. And that is why the FBI never pinned it on them, because they weren't D.B. Cooper. If McCoy and Rackstraw had been D.B. Cooper, they would have been prosecuted and convicted for being D.B. Cooper, but they weren't.
Did you watch Dan Greider's D.B. Cooper Deep Family Secrets?
I did. Interesting. Like anything else, it's persuasive. It's a persuasive attempt, and anytime things are persuasive, that's the beauty of this thing, is you can listen to, I thought Dwayne Weber was the worst. I would have said Dwayne Weber is the worst suspect other than Recca until I listened to Collins on your podcast. He is a master storyteller. Complete fiction perhaps, but he's a great storyteller, and he's very convincing.
He is. I mean, the first time I interviewed him, he left my house. I was like, holy shit, it might be Dwayne.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's and I did appreciate that he would at least call out Joe and say, no, Joe, no, because I consider Dwayne Webber, what I have begun calling Dwayne Webber, I call him the Forrest Gump of the Cooper Vortex. What I mean by that is, if you watch Forrest Gump is everywhere where everything ever happens. There's Forrest Gump meeting John Lennon. There's Forrest Gump meeting Kennedy. There's Forrest Gump meeting, LBJ, right? He's everywhere, right? He's at the National Mall when Abby Hoffman is giving his speech. He's everywhere, right? So Joe basically Forrest Gumps Dwayne into every situation with Cooper. It's like she basically reverse engineers a story. It's like,
yeah. And towards the end, whatever someone would say on the drop zone, without even checking, she would insert that into Dwayne's story. And it's like, that's not relevant. You didn't need to put that in there.
Yeah. And see, I have a theory with her too, that I believe that, she knew about the burglary at the is it Heisen?
Mm-hmm. Heisen
store. She knew about that before we did. Okay?
Yes.
And that's interesting. But I have a theory that she probably pestered an FBI agent, possibly Ing, long enough to have access to some of the FBI files. I really think that, because there are some things that Joe did know that were only in the 302s now that we see. And it's like, this woman's full of crap, right? In my opinion.
Even Bruce says she had some ability to befriend people and extract information from, whether it was because she annoyed them to death or because she was very charming.
Yeah,
maybe both.
And something I encountered in the 302s was somebody in the 302s tried to like James Earl Ray comes up in the 302s. Not about Dwayne, but James Earl Ray, for those who don't know, the assassin of MLK, comes up in the 302s. And I don't know the context of it, but it's talking about people who were inmates who served with James Earl Ray, telling stories. And then you have Joe saying that, Dwayne was, a cellmate or something of James Earl Ray. It's like, what? And like, I saw that just like a few weeks ago. I was like, oh my God. I said, James Earl Ray is in the 302s. So I feel like Joe had access to this stuff, because come on. I mean, who would ever have inserted James Earl Ray into the DB Cooper vortex? But she did. And then I see it in the 302s from like the 70s or 80s. Somebody saying, somebody saying I was James Earl Ray's cellmate and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, here she goes, Forrest Gumping things again. She's Forrest Gumping Dwayne into whoever this person was in the 302s. It's like, come on.
Yeah,
come on, Joe.
She did know some stuff before other people. And it's interesting to go back and look at some of that, and people discredit her right away. And it's like, well, she was actually right about that one.
She was. And now she's right insofar as having access to reverse engineer her story before we could get a hold of it. So it's not so much that she's right, it's that she got to something first. But with Joe, I really feel like, I think she believed, and I don't know how her brain works.
With the amount of time she dedicated to it, she believed.
And it's interesting, I really do think that Joe Webber is the biggest victim of the entire hijacking, because her life was robbed. The last 25 years of her life was just taken away by DB Cooper. And if DB Cooper had never happened, then Joe would not have been some obsessive lady making almost a fool of herself for 25 years. So, she was a victim of Cooper, really. And why Dwayne would have said that to her, if he even did.
Yeah, that's interesting. She's a victim of DB Cooper, whether or not Dwayne was Cooper.
Yeah, exactly. Way more than Tina or somebody. Tina will tell you that she just got along fine. And, I am a person who believes that. People will impugn Tina and say, well, she didn't talk, so she must have lost her mind or had a nervous breakdown. Tina's a unique person, certainly. But I don't think there's anything. There was a person on the Facebook group today or yesterday who called her diabolical. Said she was a diabolical character. Yeah, no. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? Diabolical, because she's not sharing info about Cooper. Well, man, maybe she shared all she can share. if I rode a train with somebody for 4 hours, how much could I talk about it really? And I think she was afraid at the time, and that affected her memory of it. Now Tina is weird. I'm going to go on a sidebar here, if you'll let me.
Let's do it.
So I recently did a thing where I went through all of the comments that have been released about the sketches. And I followed all of the comments made by the stewardesses about the sketches. Now we can track who said what, because you can basically on the 302s, you can put in the letters. With the stewardesses at least, you can fill in the letters to who said what. So Schaefer obviously has, how many letters are in Schaefer. Schaefer, the block of redaction is a certain size, right? So that's Flo talking. Okay. Now the issue comes with Mucklow and Hancock have the same number of words, letters. So that can be tricky, but you can work it out because there are ways to work it out. So regardless, I went through all of the stewardesses' comments about the sketch being created, and I plugged in, who, what, when, and I actually wrote in their names, Mucklow, Hancock. I figured out who was saying what, and you can figure out Mucklow and Hancock, even though they're the same amount of letters. You can figure it out because of, for example, Tina will say, I was sitting next to him, so it'll be like a redaction of seven letters or whatever. I didn't see him too well because I was sitting next to him the whole time. Well, I know that's not Hancock saying that, because Hancock never sat next to Cooper. So you can kind of work it out who's saying what. Now here's the thing about Tina though. Tina literally says that every sketch looked like Cooper. I mean, I found that out in the 302s, and I put that on the Facebook group. Tina even thought that the first sketch, the one that they did that night, where his hair's all wavy and stuff looking, which that sketch is probably just a template sketch to say, hey.
The crazy angry looking one?
No, the one from the night of the hijacking, like the very, very first one, which he has really thick black hair. There's one where he's got really thick black hair, and it was done, I believe, purely based on witness descriptions. It wasn't like the sketch artist didn't work with anybody to work it out. It was just done based on descriptions. And I believe it was basically what happened is, so the girls, they went back to Minneapolis on the day after the hijacking, and they met with Roy Rose, the sketch artist. Now, we have 302s where they are viewing a fax. They're viewing a facsimile of a sketch, and what they're viewing is the sketch of this really thick. Basically, they're viewing the template of the sketch, which is a template where it's based on witness descriptions, and then it's like, okay, what should we do with this to make it look more like Cooper? You make his face longer, blah, 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 blah. It's a template, essentially. Well, Tina says the template looks like Cooper. She goes, that looks like Cooper. All you got to do is make his face longer and widen his sunglasses. That's all she gives. She goes, if you do that, it'll look just like him. And this is not even, and then we have her 2 days later when Roy Rose makes the famous Cooper sketch, the Bing Crosby sketch. She goes, it's almost 100% identical to him. That's her words. So it's like, wait a second. You said the template sketch looked just like him. Now you're saying A looks like him. And then we have her talking about composite B in 73, and she says it bears a very close resemblance to Cooper. Now, those three sketches are different people.
And Tina was not Tina. Florence didn't like the Bing Crosby sketch.
She hated it. Yeah, and she did not like it at all, and she was very adamant about that. And the FBI files say that she does not like it at all. And I don't think anybody liked it really. Now we have Tina saying she liked it, but we also have Tina saying she likes every other sketch. To me, Tina, I think that it's almost like she's like, okay, yep, that's him. See ya, bye. And it's like she didn't want to participate almost, because she gives the least. Alice gives more. Alice's 302s give more descriptions of how to make the sketch look like Cooper than Tina does. And Tina also, here's the weird thing too. Tina says in her 302s, she says she never got a full head-on look at Cooper. She says that. She goes, I was sitting next to him at all times, and all I saw was his profile.
Yeah, now, I saw that.
Come on.
Also.
No way. I mean, maybe, but like she never saw him when she was going back and forth down the aisle. She never, when she pleaded with him to take the bomb with him, she wasn't looking head on at him. When she was showing him, when she was demonstrating, here's where the aft stairs are, she wasn't looking at him head on. I don't know. That's odd to me that she would say that. And she says that multiple times in 302. She says, he was whispering in my ear and I never got a good look at him. So
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I thought, this is just my opinion. Maybe she was talking about the fact that once she was dealing with him, he had the sunglasses on.
Well, and it could be too that
But
once
that's
she
just
was,
me trying to make sense of that.
I would make sense of it by saying this, Darren. I would say that when her interactions where she wasn't seated next to him mainly occurred after they had turned the lights off in the cabin. So it was dark back there. So maybe it was dark enough to where she really couldn't get a good look at him. So maybe with the lights on, the only time she really saw him was from the side. I don't know, but I still think she walked a few notes up back and forth to the cockpit during the flight even. Although she may have just she may have just used the interphone the whole time. I don't know, but I mean, I don't know. When she brought the money bag to him, the lights were still on because the passengers were still on the plane when the money bag was brought on, right? So she would have had a good look at him then. But yeah, it's weird though. Tina is a strange, I would say, an interesting person sometimes. I don't think she wanted to participate much in the process. But yeah, she says that every single sketch she sees looks like him. The only sketch that she doesn't like is the angry looking sketch. She says something is lost she says it's not a vivid representation of Cooper. And I like the term that Alice uses. Oh no, it's Flo uses. She says this sketch looks like a hoodlum. Love the word hoodlum. She says this gives him a hoodlum appearance, and he was much more refined in appearance, is what she says. So they changed his sketch because he didn't look so angry. But Cooper has a fat lip. That is something that's interesting. And Cooper suspects, to me, need to have a fat lip. A fat lower lip is something that Roy Rose even commented. There's a YouTube video of Roy Rose being interviewed by his grandson. That's kind of an awkward video. I think it's like a high school project or something. But Roy Rose is like, he asked the girls, he says, what features did he have that were unique? And really the only thing they said was he had a protruding lower lip. And you can see that in the sketches. You see it a little bit with Bing. You really see it with the other sketches. And then the sketch that Flo did for Unsolved Mysteries 17, 18 years later, he's got this fat lower lip. So whoever Cooper was, he had a fat lower lip. And if you got little skinny lips, then you ain't Cooper.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. The only noticeable feature, the only standout thing about this dude's face was that. So right away, I think you should be able to say, oh, the guys who had big Dumbo ears.
Yeah, right.
They're out. Or your suspect that had a ridiculous cleft chin. Or, there was this guy that was, blind as a bat and he wore Coke bottle glasses.
Or he had baby blue eyes. I can get by with hazel eyes, although I don't want to dissuade anybody. I mean, the eyes I don't know the eye color of many of my best friends. I couldn't tell you. It's just not something I notice. So think about it. I don't know if you could either. So I think a lot of people listening probably couldn't. If you had a gun in my head, I couldn't tell you the eye color of my best friends, even maybe for certain. It's just not something that I pay attention to. I don't know. I think Flo got a real good look at him. I think she was looking into the eyes of the devil. I think she was terrified of Cooper. I mean, you look at the Flo sketch from '89. It's like Count Chocula. It's like, it's this terrifying, Count Dracula, I guess, creature. It's this horrible, angry looking man. It's bizarre. But that's her image of him, right? It's her image. She was terrified of him. Although it's weird though, with when I say that they're terrified, I don't think that they were afraid of Cooper in an interesting way. When you read the 302s, this guy had a bomb with him. Okay. Now, after the passengers get off the plane, and you read the 302s, there are moments when Alice and Flo are back there essentially shooting the shit with Cooper. Like they're talking about, oh, where are you going to take us? They're asking him like, oh, where are you planning on taking us? They're just talking to him. Now, I'm getting as far away as possible from a possible bomb, right? I mean, they didn't have to be back there. They weren't ordered to go talk to Cooper, right? Alice at one point says that she asked Cooper, hey, is that a parachute? In her 302, she says that, he was messing with the parachutes, and she walked back there and was like, hey, what you doing? That's kind of the sense I get. She was like, hey, is that a parachute? And he's like, yeah, this is the parachute, and then there's the moments where, he asks, like, basically he does like a dad joke, and he's like, hey, pick this bag up, and hands it to Flo, and she goes, oh, this is really heavy, and I think she was insulted by that. She says that. She says that is when he acted childish. So people have this thing when they say Cooper acted giddy when he got the money, and maybe he did, but the childish, when you read it, when it says childish, Flo says he was acting childish when he asked her to pick up the bag. And I think it's not like he was jumping around for joy. I got money. He was basically patronizing her and being childish by saying, hey, check out how much money's in this bag, or it was immature almost it was awkward for the situation to be like, hey, let's joke about this. And I think it offended her a little bit. She felt patronized. But still, they could have been anywhere in that aircraft, but they're back there talking to him about where are you going to take us? Right? Or, hey, is that a parachute? I'm gonna be up to near the front door of the cockpit, as far away as I can be from this bomb, right?
Well, he obviously had an ability to control the situation and keep people calm.
Yeah. I don't think they were, I don't think that they were, I don't know. Something about it is, and we go back to Rackstraw. Rackstraw was a brute of a guy. By all accounts, Rackstraw could not hit on a woman, right? He had this characteristic where he was just a dude, right? He was just a testosterone dude, right? And I don't think he would not be able to hit on sexy stews, Yet Cooper, there's no indication that Cooper did anything untoward and improper toward those stews. In fact, he awkwardly tried to give them money out of his own pocket, which would have been the change. It's interesting. The money, I think Alice or somebody says it was small bills, which would have been the money that Flo gave him earlier. Because if you remember, he paid for his drink with the $20 bill, interestingly enough. He bought his ticket with the $20 bill, and he paid for his drink with the $20 bill. And Flo said, hey, I have to complete my rounds before I'll have change to give you change for your 20. And Cooper says, that's fine. So I believe those small bills that he offered them was the change that she gave him. Otherwise, he would have used those small bills to buy his drink. And I have a neat observation too that I'll comment on recently. So Cooper, speaking of him drinking, so he has one drink. Somewhere it came out that he had two. It's in Tusaw's book. It says he has two, but there's no indication that he was ever given two, unless. But he did spill his drink, right? And Bill Mitchell says that's when he first noticed Cooper. Is this dude spilled his drink next to him? Like, oh gosh, what is this clumsy guy doing? And that was when he first noticed it. So that drink may have been replaced. Perhaps Flo gave him another drink because he spilled that one. Maybe that's where the two drinks come from. But it's interesting to note that Tina says that she offered him refreshments multiple times throughout the whole hijacking. She's like, hey, do you want something to drink or whatever? And he said no. And to me, that speaks to Cooper's intelligence. I think he was fearful of being drugged, which, as we know, with the three cheeseburgers and a Head Start guy,
yeah,
stewardesses could drug somebody, right? So I think he was fearful of that. Think about that. That's why he said no. He had to be thirsty. He's smoking cigarettes and nervous, possibly, likely. He probably was thirsty. And I personally, so I try to put myself in people's shoes. That's one thing that I do in criminal law, is when you're trying to figure out what's going on, is you put yourself in. I mean, people are people, right? It's like when these anthropologists are like, well, I wonder how these Roman soldiers carried their shields. Well, they would carry their shields the same way you'd carry your shield, right? They're people. Whatever's comfortable for us now is comfortable for people 2,000 years ago, right? So a person's a person. So when Cooper is sitting in that airplane, if I'm Cooper and I am conscious of the fact that I don't want to be drugged by some girl, stewardess, and I'm saying I don't want any drinks. Like I said, notice that he only got drinks before the hijacking, so they wouldn't, they'd have had no reason to drug his drink, right? When Cooper goes to the bathroom, there's all these speculations. Oh, why did he go to the bathroom? Why he went to the lavatory? Why did Cooper go to the bathroom and he was back in 3 or 4 minutes? Well, he probably had to pee. I mean, he's a person, right? He probably had to use the bathroom, and also he probably took a drink of water from the faucet in there, assuming they had a faucet. I believe they did in the 727. I've looked at they had a sink basically. So I would have drank some water while I'm back there, because he had to be thirsty.
That's
but he was clever,
point.
and yeah, I think he'd probably just drank some water when he's back there, and probably had to go to the bathroom. It's not a great mystery why he went to the lavatory. He may have just wanted something to drink, and that's where the sink is. It's no great mystery why he went to the lavatory. He's a person. He went to the bathroom the same reason we go to the bathroom, And so I think that that going back to Tina, I don't think that she was too anxious to participate in the events, and I think that's played out in how she's lived her life, right? I mean, her early interactions with the FBI during the investigation are indicative of how she is until recently. I guess recently she's kind of come out of her shell, which is interesting. A lot of these people have, and I wish Flo would come out of her shell too. You see Bill Mitchell being more open, right? And Bill Mitchell's coming to CooperCon in November for the second time in a row. Tina is out, and Tina gave her Rolling Stone article. The HBO documentary to me is the best one of all of the more recent documentaries because it doesn't really, it's got suspects, but it's just really well done. Everything about it's well done, and it's just funny to see Tina going, "Hi, I'm Tina. I was hijacked 51 years ago." It's like, whoa, what in the world? That's not the Tina we know. Who's kind of, quiet and but she's, and maybe they're getting older. These people are in their 70s now. Maybe something to do with the twilight of your life is, these people are footnotes in history, but I'm not going to be a footnote in history. You might not be a footnote in history, but they're footnotes in history. So, and maybe they're embracing their footnote, So maybe I would be that way. I'm like, okay, well, how many years do I have left to be what I am? This is my legacy. If I'm going to be remembered in 200 years, it's going to be as the girl who was hijacked by DB Cooper. And she is. That's what she's going to be remembered for. Unless she, goes and kills the president or something, Tina Mucklow is going to be remembered for being hijacked. Period.
Yeah. Plus, there could be, she thought, after 10 years, this will go away.
Yeah, no.
and then
they'll find him.
Maybe after 15 years, this will go away. But it's been 50, so maybe she gave up on it going away.
Yeah, perhaps. But yeah, so it's interesting that that these people are coming out of their shell, and I really wish that Florence Schaffner would, do something. I mean, I don't know. It's just, but again, they don't owe us anything, and that's what made me upset about seeing that comment today on the Facebook group where it said Tina's diabolical for withholding information. Well, screw you, man. She didn't owe you anything. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, she's a human being, and she's living her life, and okay, it's something that happened. I mean, I would hate to be thought about something that 1 5-hour period of my life is my life, right? I mean, that's, people are more than what happened to them in one day, generally.
Right. An event they didn't choose to be a part of.
Yeah. And even, Tina was, Tina said that she cried. Obviously, she broke down in tears after they landed in Reno. But I don't know. I mean, she's telling people that she was not in the Rolling Stone article. She says, I was not, this didn't affect my life. She says, I moved on. I wasn't really afraid. I was back. I mean, she was back to work.
Yeah, I think she says, I don't have PTSD from the event, but I have been bothered by people continually harassing me about it.
Yeah, if she's got any PTSD, it's from that. So,
and one thing I really hate, I see all the time, it's like, if I could just show Tina a picture of my suspect, she would be like, dang, that's it. And,
no way.
She's said that she would never be able to identify him by a picture anymore. Bill Mitchell said that at CooperCon. He's like, I've seen so many pictures and I just have sort of a vague recollection of who he was. I don't see a mental image of the guy.
Yeah, I think there's features. And like one thing that's interesting is that in the 302s, and this kind of speaks to our memory, is in the 302s, when Tina is shown the Hoodlum sketch in October of 72, when that is produced, she says, I like composition A. She basically says she likes being more, but then she goes, but this might be because I've seen it so often that it's influenced my decision making. She says that. She says, it's all becoming foggy to me at this point. This is less than a year later. And she says, I still like the first sketch the best, but she admits maybe it's just because I'm being influenced because I've seen it so often, which is interesting. And so that's, I mean, even if she's being, I mean, we have no reason to think she's being dishonest when she's saying he's becoming foggy in my memory. He certainly didn't become foggy in Flo's memory, I don't think, because she was pretty able to vividly remember him, 19 years later. But again, some people are more observant than others, right? Some people, like I said, there are bad sketches, there's good sketches. I mean, look, I tell people this all the time. When I was a prosecutor, I prosecuted a kidnapping case, okay, where a couple was held in their home. Now, this is a thing people might not know. Kidnapping doesn't mean you're like, basically, you don't have to be thrown in a trunk and carried off to be kidnapped. You can be kidnapped in your own home, okay? Kidnapping just means that you're held against your will, basically, inside of a place, okay? So a burglary could also be a kidnapping, and there are burglars who are charged with kidnapping, okay? So these people were basically held hostage in their house for hours while these people just ransacked their house. Okay, there was a gunman who held them at gunpoint. Now, a few days later, we had a photo lineup, and the wife picked the wrong person. I mean, she picked the wrong guy, even though the guy who would eventually be convicted of it was one of the photos. So this is days later, and she picks the wrong guy when the photo of the guy who did it is right there in front of her. So, come on. I mean, it makes you wonder if you had a photo lineup 5 days after Cooper, the hijacking, and Cooper was in there I mean, they asked them that too. If you read the 302s, the witness statements, they say, some of them say, I would not be able to recognize him if I saw him again. And this is the same day of the hijacking. This is like they walk off the plane. They're in the airport talking to FBI people, and they're saying, I don't know if I could recognize him again. The guy who sold him the ticket, was it is it Dennis Lenz?
I think so. I get some of those names mixed up.
Hal Williams and Dennis Lenz, the gate agent, and the guy who sold the ticket.
Lenz.
Yeah, Dennis Lenz. Yeah, Dennis Lenz says, I don't know if I could recognize him again. He was just a guy. He
was one of hundreds of people he sold a ticket to that day.
Right. How would he remember? And it's like people say, oh, well, maybe he was right-handed, because it's funny. He says possibly, he possibly paid with his right hand. What? I mean, he says that, and the thing is, I guess some agent asked him what hand did he pay with. He goes, possibly right. How would he even remember that? Come on, that's ridiculous. And I'll comment on something too. Another sidebar, as we keep going through sidebars, is that I'm left-handed, okay? And lefties always pay attention to other lefties. We kind of have a complex. We're only 10% of the population. Lefties always notice other lefties, and we kind of do things a certain way. And Cooper has there's a lot of things that make me think Cooper is left-handed, okay? And I'll go through some of these as a lefty, okay? So presumably Cooper had a choice. I believe Bill Mitchell has said that he got on the plane after Cooper. It's my understanding. I believe he may have been the last or second to last person to get on the plane. Robert Gregory also says he was the last person on the plane. But I feel like Bill Mitchell says he was like running to get on the plane, basically.
Yeah, I believe that's the story.
Yeah. So Cooper got on the plane, and he had his choice. Do I sit on the right side or the left side, right? And he chose the right side, all right? Now, I would choose the right side of the plane because I would want my dominant hand to be free to interact in the aisle, right? Or to smoke cigarette. I mean, because remember, he has the bomb, quote bomb, sitting in the seat. Basically, the bomb is sitting in the window seat. He has it sitting in the window seat with his right hand in it at all times. Tina says his right hand was in it at all times. He never removed his right hand from it. Well, my dominant hand is not going to be my dummy hand, basically. All right, I'm not just going to let my dominant hand just be idle, for hours. No way. So I think, and also the tie clip goes on left-handed, right? And people can say, well, the FBI may have put it on differently. We can't be for certain. Well, come on, I don't know. I'm going to have more faith in the FBI that they put it back together the way it was looking. Probably, my guess. Maybe not, but so I think that him smoking, he's smoking left-handed too. Obviously, if his right hand is in the bomb, he's smoking left-handed. Fine motor functions are done with your dominant hand, generally, right? Eating small things is done with your dominant hand. Smoking, I guess you could smoke with your right hand if you're left-handed, or you could smoke with your left hand if you're right-handed, but it's still kind of awkward, I would think, maybe. So I think there's things that indicate that he was left-handed, which, again, it's not dispositive of anything. It's kind of like the smoking thing. People say, well, he needed to be a chain smoker. Well, 8 cigarettes in 5 hours isn't chain smoking. He was a 1 pack a day guy, they said. That's speculation in the FBI, right? But my father was a smoker when I was growing up. He smoked 3 packs of Marlboro Reds a day. That's a chain smoker. Okay. Cooper smoked 8 in 5 hours. That's like 1.5. And it's 1.5 an hour or something.
Yeah, I don't think you could say whether or not he was a chain smoker based on the flight, but I think you can confidently say he was a smoker because, like I've said, I'll give anyone 5 hours that's never smoked a cigarette to smoke 8. Yeah. And let's see how that plays out.
And what's the point of smoking? Why would you smoke if you weren't a smoker? You're not
it's a disguise.
Fooling anybody. It's a disguise. Bullcrap. again, this is an era before surveillance cameras, right? This is an era before video footage of all kinds of things, right? I mean, it is interesting though, by the way, that I did see that I believe a guy took a picture of Heinemann. I read this in a newspaper article recently from '72, and we can talk about the copycats later. I do like the copycats a lot, but Heinemann, some guy took a picture of him during the hijacking. He told the newspaper, I had a camera with me, and I sneakily took a picture. I was like, oh, this could be trouble. He took a picture of it. So there's presumably a photograph of Heinemann during the hijacking of his plane, which I thought was like, oh gosh. So, but other than Robert Gregory turning around with a camera and taking a picture of DB Cooper, he wasn't worried about that. I mean, and the sunglasses, the sunglasses is a disguise. In a way, it hides your. But to me, it's more about the poker player. So it's like what poker players wear sunglasses, right? You're hiding. It's doing two things at once. You're hiding your own fear, but you're also using it to intimidate people, right? There's an intimidation factor with sunglasses, especially dark sunglasses. And I think Cooper needed the intimidation factor. So I think it hid his own nervousness. There's no way Cooper, unless, look, I don't care who he was. He was nervous. He had to be. He just hid it well. He hid it very well, obviously. The other hijackers were out of control. I don't know enough about Heady and LaPointe's hijackings, but McCoy was a nervous wreck. Sweating, his makeup was sweating off of him. He's cussing, and he's a Mormon kid. He's probably not a cusser.
Yeah, he drew a lot of attention to himself.
Yeah.
Before his hijacking even started.
That's right. The guy next to him was like, something's weird. The pilot, that's right, the pilot of the plane before the hijacking took place was diverting the plane to Grand Junction or somewhere to land. He had called the FBI saying, "Hey, there's a guy on our plane. I think we're about to get hijacked." That's crazy. The pilot saw McCoy and was like, "Oh crap, this guy's trouble." Called the FBI. The FBI said, "Hey, land at Grand Junction or wherever it was." And right as they were about to, and the pilot got on the PA and said, "Hey, we have a maintenance problem. We're going to be landing in wherever." And that's when McCoy was like, "Oh crap, I better do this now." And that's when he did the hijacking and said, "We're not landing right now. We're coming back up." He was not nervous, but the sunglasses definitely hid his fear, but it also intimidated. And I guess it did work as a disguise in a way. But I don't know. I think it's more just, I think it's more, I don't think it's a disguise. I think it's more just on the psychological reasons I mentioned.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't say it's a disguise. It does disguise your eyes and sort of, and it'll draw attention more to your sunglasses than features of your face.
Right.
But let me ask you, talking about the sketches, do you think that the fact that they were changed around did damage to the case?
Well, I know it did. One of the FBI's reasonings for, the FBI had obvious, they changed the sketch from Bing. The FBI didn't like Bing, apparently, because they were getting too many leads from young people. He looked too young. And the FBI say that in there is a document that they send to Hoover, I guess, to the director of the FBI, saying, "Hey, we're making a new sketch, and this is why. We're getting too many leads from people who are out of the age range, right? Because this sketch looks like it could be a 25-year-old. It could be a 30-year-old. That's not who we're looking for. We need to change this and make it color to more accurately reflect his age." And it says this will dramatically cut down on the number of leads we get, false leads, basically, if we make a new sketch that presents him as older. So yeah, of course it damaged it, because maybe if, I don't know, I think it diverted FBI resources away from where maybe it could have been earlier. And I don't blame the FBI in this case. People say that all the time. "Oh, the FBI botched this." I used to think that, but then I started reading 302s. I've scrolled through 30,000 of these documents. They're busting their ass. Really. Now, even when somebody calls up and says, "Hey, I saw DB Cooper in that Perry Mason episode last night," they still have to type out a report. Ding, 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 ding. There's a report saying this man called and said he doesn't know the episode name, but it was in Perry Mason. It's like, come on. So they did their legwork, I think. I believe they pulled every sketch. I believe they pulled all the skydiving cards from like, I think every like state agency was like, go to your local skydiving, centers and pull all the cards and, see if somebody fits or whatever and ask questions. I mean, you've got FBI agents going out to North Carolina to talk about Ted Braden to these people, apparently, I mean, that they tried, but they tried.
They definitely wanted to catch him. Hell
yeah, they did. It's idiotic to think they didn't. And that might be a good segue into the misinformation about the case. I think DB Cooper is misunderstood because I think the FBI, their contention that he died in the jump, to me, doesn't ring true. I think it's a public statement, and I think the public statement is like, "Don't do drugs, kids." Cooper died. He do the crime, you do the time, right? Well, he did the crime and died. And that's what happened to you if you do crime, right? I don't know. And also I think, I mean, what else were they going to say? Well, shit, I guess we didn't get him. They're not going to say that,
right?
I mean, you see Himmelsbach in Unsolved Mysteries, 89, and that's laughable, by the way. That recreation, it's like whoever DB Cooper is in that, they got some like hick who's like, go on, girl, get up to the front of the plane, go on, get. And it's like, what in the world? It's so funny, but that recreation in the Unsolved Mysteries is funny. But Himmelsbach has him jumping out into like Siberia, and he's like, oh, I think he landed and crawled toward a stream and died next to a stream. It's like, what? Was this 10 miles north of Portland? This isn't Yukon, But that's what people think, right? Because they watch, because they'll use the same footage over and over again of the Ariel mountain there, right? That mountain that's kind of high near Ariel, right? Ariel is wooded, and it is, but they use the same footage over and over again of that, right? As if that is descriptive of the entire drop zone, which it's not, not at all. So, but what were the FBI going to say? Well, we didn't get him. No, they're not going to say that. So it's, clearly they didn't think he died because they did a hell of a lot of investigating afterwards, right? And what's funny is they keep all their interviews, the FBI's interviews with these. Earl Cossey, the controversial Earl Cossey's like, oh yeah, 5 jumps, he'd have been fine. He might have broken his ankle, but he'd have been fine. He couldn't have, it was dark, he couldn't see where he was landing. Would have been a heavy landing, but yeah, you give me somebody, we'll do 5 jumps, they could jump out of a 727, no problem. Cossey says that like a day after the hijacking, the FBI, because they go to him to ask, right? And there's no in the 302s, there's no skydivers who are like, oh yeah, he died. They're all like, yeah, probably wouldn't be something I would attempt if I was a newbie, at night, kind of rough. But I mean, it's like Marty's thing, right? With the World War II guys, right? You pull a ripcord, and I've seen people, I respect Larry, I do. I because hey, look, I'm here right now because of Larry Carr, probably. That's why I'm sitting in this chair talking to you. It's probably Larry Carr's efforts. So I don't want to diminish Larry Carr. I think he's a nice guy. I think him and Bruce have had it out.
He did more for the case than any other FBI agent.
Ever. Absolutely. All Himmelsbach did is say he's a dead man bastard. That's it. And I mean, okay, well, he's a dead man bastard. I'll move on to the next mystery, right? No. So I think I'm trying to make a compilation, by the way, right now. I'm going through all these old, I'm actually making a compilation of Himmelsbach's greatest hits. Because like, I've been going through newspaper articles, finding every time he like has some descriptive title for Cooper. Like I've seen him, obviously Sleazy Rotten Crook's the famous one, but I've seen a stupid, desperate rascal recently, an unscrupulous jerk I saw. I mean, like, he has all these like thing. Every article he has some different like nomenclature for Cooper. It's kind of funny.
But one that gets me about his wild quotes is vulgar, foul language.
No, yeah,
and I'm like,
I don't know.
That's not reported by anyone.
Nope, I don't get it. I don't get that at all. And even like I've been looking recently at the tobacco stained fingers thing, right? That the first time I see that is in there's an article, I believe, a newspaper article from the early 80s where Himmelsbach says that. So he had cigarette stained fingers, right? And then there's a 302 from 1989 that says cigarette stained fingers, right? Or tobacco stained fingers, whatever it is. But that's nowhere else in any 302 I've seen. about it, about Cooper, right? So I don't know if that's something Himmelsbach made up and just osmosis its way into the FBI's culture, right? Their understanding of Cooper. But yeah, his opinion of Cooper is almost personal. And to me, I say he doth protest too much, right? I think he's mad at Cooper because Cooper got away with it, and he knows it.
And that was his, I think he wanted to ride off into the sunset having solved this big case.
And he didn't.
And instead, he had to ride off into the sunset with it being unsolved.
And with the money fine being 2 weeks earlier, right? 2 weeks before he retired, the money fine. It's like, oh my God. It's almost like someone did that to insult him. But no, but the misinformation has spread. The FBI's misinformation has just really spread throughout I call it I'm really interested in the zeitgeist of Cooper, right? Like how people perceive Cooper. Because when I talk to people about Cooper, they have an understanding of it. A lot of dudes who are like, oh yeah, I know that case. And when I talk to them, they act like he jumped into the Yukon, right? Because that's what people think. Not 10 miles north of a major metro city, right? I mean, you're from that area. So you know, like, I mean, the FBI's official revision, because they revised from the aerial. The aerial was their first thought, right? And for whatever reason, newspapers have kept on with the aerial thing, because that's just what it was the first place they looked, right? So I think people just repeat it was aerial. But Le Center is where he jumped, according to the FBI, right? In 72, they revised it to him jumping over Le Center and him blowing, if he pulled his chute right away, he's blowing 3 miles in some direction, right, from Le Center. They said the plane was right over the town of Le Center when he jumped out. So, I mean, Le Center is next to an interstate, right? I mean, I-5 is right there. It seems to me that looking at if you Google Earth this, I advise everybody who's interested in Cooper, Google Earth the area. It'll change your perspective. I mean, he could have walked anywhere, and in 2 hours, he's at a road at the worst 2 hours. I mean, probably 30 minutes. He's coming upon something. I mean, the interstate's right there. I mean, how could you say that someone jumps into the wilderness when you are, even like the aerial is like 10 miles from the interstate. The Yukon has no interstate 10 miles away, right? I mean, so that's not the wilderness. I encountered all these misnomers about the Cooper case when I would say my main contribution to Cooper so far is the Wikipedia page. Okay, and I'll get into that. The Wikipedia page has been an interesting journey for me. I've had some battles with the administrators of Wikipedia about changing certain things on the Cooper page, because the problem is with Wikipedia, that's not a problem, it's a good thing generally. But Wikipedia requires reliable sources. Okay, you have to use reliable sources as your sites. Okay, which means not self-published books. It has to be a reliable publisher. It's got to be a newspaper of note. These things like this. There's very tight restrictions. And with D.B. Cooper, even our Cooper Bible is self-published, basically. I mean, it's not self-published, but whoever published Bruce's book is not some powerhouse publisher, right? And so Marty's book is not, Drew's book is not. I mean, the only ones that are actually able to be used on Wikipedia are Norjack, the Gunther book, which is, I mean, arguably fiction, maybe.
I wanted to talk about that. I have that on my list.
Okay, good. We'll get to it. So Norjack, Gunther's book, some children's book is on there because that was a publisher. Edwards' book came out, which thank God, because I was able to use Edwards' book a little bit. When it came out, I was like, oh, thank God, a major publisher. But it's basically, and Last American Outlaw, or whatever the book is, the Rackstraw book is able to be used on Wikipedia. So it's very limited, right?
Isn't that a small publisher too, though?
I don't think so. I mean, it's allowed on Wikipedia regardless. They allowed it. So what people don't know is there's a whole back page. Every Wikipedia article has a back page where administrators and things discuss changes, right? So as of today, I've made about 400 changes to the Wikipedia page. 400. I have basically made myself emperor. I have, like Napoleon, I've like put the crown on my head. I said, I am the emperor of this page, and anybody else who, doesn't understand this case can piss off. And I've run off some people. Like, for example, there was an administrator who tried to like gang up on me about something, and he was like, okay, I know what it was. So I used Edwards. Edwards basically says that Cooper sits in the back of the plane, strategically, which obviously he did, because it allowed all the things to go on in front of him. Nobody could come up behind him and club him with an axe or whatever, right? He was next to the phone, right? The phone's right behind him. Obviously it was picked on purpose, So I put that in the Wikipedia article. I write and I cite Edwards saying it was a strategic choice to sit there. And this guy removes that. This admin shows him and goes, and in the back page, he's like, you really think that Cooper picked this seat on purpose? Who is this Edwards guy to say this? He's like, Cooper was just some dumb criminal. I'm like, what? And so I basically like berated this guy, saying, you know, even low rent criminals pick certain things on purpose, right? Cooper, this is a well thought out thing, right? And so I ran him off, so he's not bothering me anymore. He got mad too because he didn't believe when I posted the weather. I actually posted on there, so that's another thing too. The National Weather Service has their file in the FBI files of the Portland airport at 8 o'clock at night that night. And I believe that Portland airport that night at 8 o'clock, the National Weather Service says the conditions were 42 degrees Fahrenheit with light rain showers and 7 miles of visibility and a westerly wind of 12 miles an hour.
The most typical November weather for Portland.
Right. It's just dreary, just is what it is, right?
Yep.
I mean, I think Radicek called it the soup. It's just is what it is, right? I mean, note that I've maybe I'm wrong, but I've never seen Radicek. I've never seen Scotty. I've never seen Andy. I've never heard from Tina say it was a storm. I can't recall anytime they ever said that.
No.
I mean, no.
That is a great point. I mean, the wilderness thing, I push back on that, but sometimes I don't get into it because, like, if I'm talking to someone from Chicago who's never been to the Pacific Northwest, I'm not going to explain to you what it looks like. But
right.
The storm, that is one I always push back on. Like, no, it wasn't a storm. It was raining. And if you live in Florida or if you live in Kansas City, what your experience of rain is a storm. But in the Pacific Northwest, rain is every day. And there are many levels to rain. Few storms over there.
Yeah. And so I had to push back on this guy. I said, and so I put that on the Cooper Wikipedia page, and this guy removed it. He goes, "This is nonsense." He goes, he actually says this administrator, he goes, "This is nonsense." He goes, "This is the most common knowledge of Cooper is that it was a stormy night." I'm like, I'm giving you the National Weather Service data. Okay. This is legitimate. This is a reliable source, clearly. And I ran him. He had no reply on that. He just hasn't come around, but he removed it additionally. He removed the Heisen store because it was indicative of Cooper surviving, perhaps. Cooper didn't survive. I'm removing this. I'm like, oh my God. So like, I had to fight this dude. He's a Wikipedia administrator, but I ran him off. And I've been able to make all these changes. But some things, what I'm really proud of is the dummy shoot thing. Okay. So the dummy shoot comes up a bunch on the Wikipedia page, and that's something you encounter a lot, right? And in the zeitgeist, I call it the zeitgeist of Cooper, the cultural. Oh, he jumped with a dummy chute. What a dumbass, right? Oh, well, he's a dummy. He jumped. Only a dummy would jump with a dummy chute. It was, blah, 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 blah. But then it's like, well, wait a second. He could not have used it as a parachute. He lacked the D-rings, right? His harness could not have, it could have hooked up with, it did have clips that could hook up to it, but these clips weren't going to keep it on you if a parachute comes out of it, right? The clips worked to put a parachute on you as a bag, I guess. But Cooper, whatever it was, Cooper did not jump out of that airplane with a dummy chute, intending it to be a reserve parachute. No, absolutely not. I'm going to give him more credit than that. Now, it is weird that the dummy chute doesn't show up on the aircraft when they land, right? It's not there. So what did he do with it? I don't know. My thought is that he may have just got angry and said, they're trying to kill me, and threw it out the aircraft, and it just never was found, right? Because if you go, there's a great video that I'd advise people to find. I'll post it on the Facebook group later. It's a great video I found where a private pilot flew basically Victor 23 in like a Cessna with an HD camera attached to the wing. So you're flying at daytime from like somewhere south of Seattle all the way to Portland. And it's really neat to see the terrain. So in between Portland and Seattle, there is a lot of trees. There's a lot of nothing. That's wilderness, right? So Cooper easily could have just chunked that thing out the aircraft, right? And that never would have been found, right?
Even if it was found, nobody would have thought anything about it, probably.
Right. It's just what it is. What is this backpack? They would have known it. Because, people didn't know the specifics of D.B. Cooper back then. But the dummy chute, so there's all this misinformation on the Wikipedia page about how he jumped with a dummy chute. It means he's inexperienced and it probably got him killed and all this other stuff. So I was able to, with the FBI files, point out all the D-rings and all these other things. And Larry Carr used the dummy chute to say as one of his reasons why he didn't survive. He was an inexperienced idiot, and Larry Carr hits on the dummy chute a lot. Back in the day, he did. Okay, and so there's a lot of old Larry Carr quotes on the Wikipedia page that I had to combat. I had to fight them with other evidence. So I had to fight to get the FBI files on the Cooper Wikipedia page. They did not want to allow sites to the FBI files on the Cooper page. So, this is not reliable evidence. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I brought out all these legal arguments. I was like, look, in law, we have a thing called the best evidence rule, right? The best evidence of Tina Mucklow's statements isn't from some book. It's from the actual transcript of her interview, right? That's the best evidence. And that is a government document. It's not some Photoshop, right? So, and I pointed out how on other pages, like the Watergate page has FBI sites from their FBI documents about it. So I was like, and that's a locked Wikipedia page. There's Wikipedia pages that you can't edit. That's a locked Wikipedia page. Che Guevara has FBI files on there. So I was able to get the FBI files, thankfully, on there. But the weather, the dummy chute, I mentioned that the D-rings thing about how whatever Cooper did with it, he didn't jump with it as a parachute. I mean, whether he used it as a money bag, I don't know. As an extra bag, I don't know what he did with it. But it's a mystery, I guess. But whatever it wasn't as a parachute. The dummy chute not being on the aircraft says nothing about his parachuting acumen, right? To me, because it wasn't used as a parachute. So, okay. The mystery bag, Cooper's bag of goodies, right? Whatever was in that bag, to me, that's a fascinating thing, right? And
yes, it is
very fascinating, because that's not something that anybody ever talked about, right? Every representation you see of Cooper, he's got his briefcase, right? Doesn't have a bag with him, right? Larry Carr posted, the bag. I mean, I don't know the exact dimensions, but it wasn't small. It was not small. It was not a lunch sack. It was not a lunch bag. It was big enough. Okay. And for those who are listening, Larry Carr got on a Facebook group and gave the dimensions of the bag, and the dimensions of the bag are listed on the FBI files, which I guess comes from Bill Mitchell or somebody saying, oh, the bag was yay big and yay small. I'm sure he gave a description of it, so they know kind of what size it was. And I found a bag, the exact dimensions of this bag in my garage. I got a measuring tape. I was like, oh my God. So I did an experiment. I was like, what can I fit in here? I fit a pair of jump boots in there comfortably. So I put in there a flashlight, a big heavy flashlight, a mag light. I put a mag light in there. I put goggles, gloves, which again, those could have easily gone in his trench coat. Didn't need to put them in a bag. But I put the mag light, a pistol. I put a pistol in there. I put jump boots in there that could fold up. I mean, you could put a lot of things in this bag. And so whatever was in that bag was not used in the hijacking, right? We know the elements of the hijacking, right? But what we don't know is what happened after Cooper sent Tina to the front, okay? So they take off from Seattle. 5 minutes later, perhaps. So they're only in the air 5 minutes. Poor Tina, the FBI files say that she's sitting in her chair. She's basically sitting where Bill Mitchell was sitting at this point. She has her hands covering her ears because the engines are so loud with the door down. She's like panicked, like, oh my God. So she says that she's like probably screaming in terror, like, oh God, it's so loud. And I think, at this point, so when they're trying to lower the aft doors, it's kind of funny that, he's like, hey, show me how to lower these doors, these stairs. And, she keeps saying, look, I'm going to get sucked out the airplane when you do this. Please tie a rope to me, and Radicek hears this and is like, hey, I'm going to come back there with a rope. And Cooper's like, nobody's coming back here. Nobody's coming back here. And she's like, well, will you tie some parachute cord to me so I don't get sucked out? She's like panicked. And I think this is the one time Tina, you can tell she loses her composure a little bit. She's terrified of getting sucked out of this airplane. And finally, Cooper I guess he's tired of her shrieking. He's like, just go up front, get out of here. And to me, that's his attitude, is like, fine. He goes, I'll do it myself, He's like, beat it. And so, she goes to the front. But again, he's back there for maybe 30 minutes before he jumps. I believe 7:43 to about 8:13, he's back there by himself. So what is he doing back there? Now, I would say he's waiting for Portland. That's one thing I would say, is he's waiting he knows about how long it's going to take to get to Portland. So he's probably waiting about that time, right? But he's doing something back there. He could have put his boots on. He could have done, who knows what he's doing, right? He could put a little, soft, cap on, whatever he did, right? But whatever was in that bag was not used in the hijackings. Whatever was in that bag was something that is used for his escape or for his jump, period. When they say, oh, he jumped out in loafers, that's nothing to it. That's more misinformation I had to deal with. I had to correct the loafers on the Wikipedia page, right? Larry Carr says loafers. Well, Tina says they're ankle-high shoes but they weren't a tie shoe. They were a
slip-on type.
Yeah, slip-on type, but they go to ankle height. And I actually found in a catalog, I found some of these type shoes recently from 1971 of these, like, they're kind of like, they're almost like little boots, sort of, and you could pull them onto your feet, but they weren't loafers. So somehow they became loafers, But anyway, what is Cooper doing back there for 30 minutes? I mean, obviously, I think he's waiting to jump, but he could be doing anything. There could have been a walkie-talkie in there that's some high-powered. I mean, there were walkie-talkies that existed back then that had CB frequencies, and they could reach up to like 10 miles or something. So I found that out recently doing some research. I was like, what kind of walkie-talkies were existing back then, and they could have easily fit in that bag. I mean, whatever it wasn't that. So the mystery bag is something that comes up a lot. And I actually posted those pictures on Facebook where I put the pistol, the boots, the mag light, goggles, gloves, and it fit comfortably. I was able to roll the bag up and just carry it around. So
I was looking at that picture again yesterday, I think, and I was just thinking, it's such a goofy collection of items. Like, what are those boots? And it's like some gloves to prevent your knuckles from being busted on something.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Well, they were just random things I had around the house. I was like, what could I put in here? But now those boots are actually World War II boots. Those are double buckle boots that they are the same height as paratrooper boots, as the Cochrane boots we talk about a lot, right? These paratrooper boots. Those boots that I put in the bag are the same height as the jump boots. So they're an approximation of what could have gone in that bag, right? So he could have had boots. But yeah, I've battled this misinformation on the Wikipedia page, and it's been a lot of fun. But it's very rewarding because my most recent victory, I would say, was changing a header on a Wikipedia page is really hard. The header, as people know, is you go to Wikipedia, it's the first thing you read. There's like a block of information, right? And then there's subsequent information, right? Changing the header is hard. The header had said that Cooper jumped into the remote wilderness of Washington State. And I'm like, oh my God. So anybody just on their couch is going to go, oh, remote wilderness. That carries with it a connotation that is not accurate at all. Remote wilderness. That sounds like you need like a hatchet and camping out, your plane crashes in Alaska, right? I mean,
yeah, and it leads people to the theory of, oh, maybe he survived the jump, but he died of exposure.
Right.
Which I can't stand that. I'm not a badass. I'm not a survivalist. I'm a small, weak man. But you could drop me anywhere in that area, wherever the drop zone is, blindfolded, and I will comfortably walk out of there. It's not too cold. You're not going to die of hypothermia.
Degrees. No, 42 degrees. Look, we found an article recently where a guy, the same night, ironically, as Cooper, there was a 63-year-old man fell into Lake Merwin, okay? And he was in the water for 10 hours the same night as Cooper. So as Flight 305 is flying in the sky, there is an old man clinging to like a upside down boat in Lake Merwin. And he's pulled out of the water after 10 hours and not dead. Whereas Himmelsbach's like, oh, he froze before he hit the ground. Like, that is an actual quote I found of Himmelsbach saying he may have frozen to death before he hit the ground. That's not even medically possible. It's like, and something else I caught Himmelsbach on too. I'm going to call out Ralph Himmelsbach. Rest in peace, Ralph. He was a fighter pilot in the war. He flew P-51 Mustangs. I found an article where Ralph Himmelsbach attempted to motorcycle around the world in 1949 recently. Him and a buddy from Oregon rode motorcycles up to Alaska, and then they like got on a boat and went to Japan, and like they were trying to like circumnavigate the world in motorcycles, Himmelsbach. So I was like, oh, you do you, Ralph. That's pretty cool, right? So, but Ralph he always says in all these interviews he does, when Cooper jumped, it was he goes, it was -7 degrees. And it's like, okay. And all these hosts, I forget which, it was one of these one of the Cooper documentaries. It wasn't a documentary, it was like one of those, it was one of the Discovery Channel type shows, right? Where Himmelsbach, it may have been his last appearance. He was really old. He's inside of a 727 and he's talking to these people. And he goes, when he jumped out the plane, it was -7 degrees. And they'll go, oh my God, oh, right. Well, it was -7 degrees Celsius, not -7 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm like, Ralph, you clever rascal. That is a clever rascal there, Ralph. It's like, okay, I see what you're doing, Ralph. -7 degrees Celsius. Well, we live in America, Ralph. We don't do Celsius. So -7 degrees Celsius is like 22 degrees Fahrenheit. So yeah, when Cooper jumped out, it was 22 degrees Fahrenheit at the height he jumped at. Okay, how long is he going to be in that weather, right? You're not going to freeze to death. I mean, we walk outside to go get the mail when it's 22 degrees. I mean, or walk down the street, right? Walk to the next bar down the road, right? 22 degrees. We're not dying of cold in 22 degrees, right? So yeah, but that was my major accomplishment. So I changed. I was able to change remote wilderness of Washington to. All I changed it to was he parachuted into the night over southwestern Washington. Ta-da! That is a accurate statement. It is not hyperbole, and it is not misleading. So that's been my effort on the Wikipedia page, to not mislead people. And I've actually had people, I've noticed people have read it on there. It's funny, I'll see YouTube videos that because YouTube videos are lazy sometimes. They'll just go to the Wikipedia page and read it off, right? Well, I've seen my own words now in YouTube videos. I'm like, I wrote that sentence at my office one day, right? And I'm like, oh, that's my words right there. Talking about the D rings or whatever, right? So that's pretty cool. It's been rewarding doing that.
The Wikipedia page has changed a lot in the last, let's say, 6 or 8 years I've been looking at it.
Yeah.
Because when I first started looking for a DB Cooper podcast to listen to, there were a bunch of episodes that were out, and a bunch of shows had done one episode, and I caught them. I'm like, you're just reading the description for the suspect. That's all you're doing? And I still catch that in other podcasts because I have all these DB Cooper alerts set up. I'm like, they're lazy. Just reading directly from the Wikipedia.
Yep.
But it has changed and it has gotten better.
Oh, it's gotten a lot better, son.
So I do definitely thank you for that, because this is where most people will be getting their information on the case.
Look, the Wikipedia page gets around 750,000 views a month. Okay. 750,000 views. So I feel like by putting in good information on the Wikipedia page, I'm doing more for, the Cooperverse than any book that's out there, right? I mean, because that's, almost 1 million people a month are getting their information about Cooper from there. And that's really important. So it's the battle over this, the zeitgeist, of Cooper, of kind of drawing back the FBI's "he died" thing, right? And so, I mean, look, when I got on the Wikipedia page, they had Cooper sitting in the wrong seat. Not only in the wrong seat, they had Cooper sitting on the wrong side of the plane. When I got on the Wikipedia page, it said Cooper was sitting in seat 18B. I was like, what? That's on the left side of the plane. That's Bill Mitchell's seat. And that was on the on the Wikipedia page. It's like, how hard is it to get the seat? How hard is it to get a seat right? I mean, golly. So, and it was, that entire page was death, 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 died, died, died. And I was like, no. No, Cooper didn't die. I mean, that's something I did that might have been the very first thing I did with Cooper, where I actually got involved in investigating something, actually, was the missing persons report. Like, I really dove in hard on the missing person angle, right? On saying, well, maybe he died. If he did die, who was he? And so I went through, I mean, all the reported people who went missing. I went through Canada. I went to Canada's missing persons website, went through all those guys. And really, as we know, I mean, Melvin Wilson is the only one and Lepsy, sort of. I mean, Lepsy's not close enough in time for me. He's 2 years earlier. I don't think so. Now, Melvin's intriguing. Melvin was a rascal for sure.
Melvin was up to some shenanigans.
Yeah, and the fact that Melvin had just been indicted for counterfeiting $200,000 is very odd. You're like, oh, okay, that's weird. That it's the same amount of money, and I believe it was $20 bills that he had counterfeited.
Was it 20s? For some reason, in my mind, it's 50s.
I feel like it was 20s.
I guess 50 would have been a lot.
That's a weird
19.
Yeah, it's a
70.
Yeah, I think it was 20s. And so it's like, ooh. Now Cooper didn't specify 20s. Remember, Cooper didn't specify any denomination.
Right.
He just said, "Give me money." I don't know, and that's something else too. When people mention the American currency or whatever it is, there are so many interpretations of that. Like I think Radicek is the one who says, because we have his actual words from the transcript of the flight recorder or whatever, right? It says like, he wants negotiable American currency. Now, to me, that's Radicek being Radicek. Like as we know, Radicek, he's very, he's like very by the book and very like precise. And I feel like it's almost a way, given that so many hijackers were wanting to go to Cuba or other countries, it's almost he's saying, hey, look, this money is American money we're asking for. He's not asking for pesos or Cuban, pesos, whatever it is, right? So he's being very specific. But that doesn't mean that Cooper said that. It doesn't mean that Cooper said that.
Yeah, there's a game of telephone going on there.
Yeah, and see, Tina's 302 says he wanted circulated currency, which that makes sense. I mean, I could see myself saying that, because what he's saying is I don't want money that's marked.
Yeah.
I want money that's from like a cash register somewhere, which makes sense. And so that makes sense to me that he would say that. I think that the negotiable American currency thing is that's kind of a red herring. I think it's not, it's not reliable.
Right, and it's not like he had a thick Scottish accent, and so that's why he said American currency.
Right. So I don't get it. I mean, it's again, those aren't his words, right? So we don't know what he said.
I think when I first looked at the Wikipedia page, I want to say there were 4 suspects listed. I think it was Kenny Christensen, Dwayne Weber, McCoy, and then the one that always cracks me up, John List.
Oh my God. Well, you know what? John List makes sense in a way. But why is he even on there? Because we know he wasn't him. I mean, he shouldn't even be on there because he's not even a suspect. He was notable, perhaps, at one point. It's like, Ted Mayfield's on there right now. That's something else I'm going to do. It's eventually. I don't want to be such an emperor where I can just expunge people from the page, but there's too many suspects on there now. Ted Mayfield's on there. John List is on there. Ted Mayfield was not a suspect. He was like 5'4" or something. I mean, he was not a suspect. They were intrigued by him for a minute, right? Like, he's kind of a crook, right? He's an armed robber who's a skydiver expert, right? I mean, they looked at him, but to me, no, he shouldn't be on there.
Well, I think John List should be on there because
it's notable.
It's really interesting. He's the right age. He looks exactly like the sketch of D.B. Cooper, and he disappeared 10 minutes before the hijacking.
After murdering family.
Murdering his whole family.
God.
And so I think there was some question, like, maybe it's this guy. It could be this guy.
Yeah, this nerdy guy who's the right age. Now he was in World War II, but he wasn't a combat soldier. But just like Melvin Wilson, it makes sense. John List makes sense. And here's the thing: imagine if John List had never been found. Okay, so John List is found, for those who don't know, late 80s, living under a different name, murdered his family, became an accountant or something in some other town. He had a new family even, and was living a quiet life. And at some point in '87, actually it was Unsolved Mysteries, I think.
Was it Unsolved Mysteries? I think it was America's Most Wanted.
That's what it was. Most Wanted, yep. America's Most Wanted got him, which is pretty cool. And that's right. That's Adam Walsh's show. Yeah, they got him. And so I was sitting there going, imagine if John List had never been found. He would be the patron saint of No Pool, right? Of the whole No Pool crowd, he'd be the patron saint, right? Because it's like, that's a guy who fits perfectly.
That's a good point. I never thought of that angle. If List hadn't been found, he could be the No Pool guy.
Yeah.
Because there's an obvious missing person
Yep.
who fits the description, who committed a horrible crime
A
right
week
before the
earlier.
hijacking.
Yeah, a week earlier. Yeah. So, and even now, see, even Mel Wilson would have been that, but now we know that Mel Wilson had kids after, right? Through the DNA, we know that Melvin Wilson had multiple children after Norjack. So Melvin Wilson didn't die. Okay, so if Melvin Wilson had disappeared, had never been found, he'd be intriguing too. Some guy who was really desperate, right? Now, remember, that's what Himmelsbach said. Himmelsbach always said Cooper was a con who was trying to pull off his last con. He needed some money. This was his last hurrah. He was in a situation where he was so desperate he didn't care about his own life, right? And that would fit Melvin Wilson and John List. So,
did you say Melvin Wilson was found?
Yeah, well, not found, but they know he lived past Norjack. He had kids. Vicki Wilson recently found through I don't know, maybe it was ancestry, some kind of DNA service or something. She somehow found that she had a brother who was born. She has a half brother who was born, I believe, in 72, like late 72. So he would have been conceived after Norjack, right? So and that is her brother from her father. DNA. They've done it by DNA. So no, Melvin Wilson survived. Melvin Wilson lived past Norjack. He was found. He did live. So he would be another patron saint of No Pool.
But he's still a missing person at this point.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
I was like, what? I missed out on the Melvin Wilson case being solved?
Yeah, they didn't find him, but they know he lived, I guess. There's evidence that he survived. I believe it was in Canada or somewhere like that. I don't know where his half-brother came from. But yeah, Vicki mentioned that they found a half-sibling who was born, who was conceived after the hijacking. If it was Melvin Wilson, it wasn't because he died during the jump, So, but him and John List would have been, patron saint, especially John List would have been a patron saint. I would have been really intrigued by John List if he hadn't been arrested.
Well, because you'd have to wonder if it could have been.
Yeah, and if he did, I mean, gosh, I just, the whole, did he survive the jump? Of course he did. I mean, duh. I mean, look, Martin McNally did not know how to put on a parachute, okay? The pilot had to come back and from a distance at gunpoint. Yeah, McNally has his gun on the guy saying, how do you put this on? And it was a reserve parachute he jumped with too. It wasn't even a main chute. Okay, they brought McNally 5 reserve chutes, I think. I think he requested 4 or 5 chutes. He also requested a collapsible shovel, which is interesting. And it's like, okay. And Paul Sini had a shovel with him too, had an entrenching tool with him too. So he was planning on burying his loot. Okay, so, when we get to the Tina Barr stuff, I mean, McNally wanted to bury his loot somewhere. Sini wanted to bury his loot somewhere. I don't know enough about Heedy or LaPointe's hijackings to know what they were up to. McCoy, he stashed his money. When he got to the ground, he put it under a culvert, So, I mean, stashing your money makes sense, But no, McNally had never jumped. McNally had never put on a parachute, I don't believe. And he jumps out just fine. Now, it wasn't just fine because when the pilot realized he had never put on a parachute, McNally did say slow the plane down to whatever miles an hour, right? Well, the pilot goes up to the front and says, this doofus has no idea how to put on a parachute. He'll have no idea how fast we're going. Crank it. So their goal was to make him spin out of control, which he did. He spun out. His money goes flying off. If you listen to McNally's podcast, he almost killed himself. He almost undid his parachute and just dropped to the earth dead.
Because they believed they were going north of 300 miles an hour at that time.
Yes. It was like 320 miles an hour. They were hauling ass. And so he spun out of control. I think LaPointe's plane was going really fast too. And for those who don't know about Richard LaPointe, this was something I added to the Wikipedia page about these copycats. I said, look, when they talk about D.B. Cooper jumping out with a business suit into the wilderness, whatever crap, look, Richard LaPointe hijacked a plane in Las Vegas, okay, in cowboy boots, a t-shirt, and khakis, slacks. And he jumps out over northern Colorado in January. He lands in the snow, okay? So, and he is found because they put trackers in his parachutes. So he was found. An interesting postscript to LaPointe. LaPointe was a PTSD. He was suffering from PTSD from Vietnam. He was a paratrooper in Vietnam. And at his arraignment the next day, he had broken his ankle when he landed. Okay. And the judge says, son, you're going to get medical treatment. You'll get free medical treatment for your ankle. LaPointe goes, how about some free psychological treatment? So I think that's pretty funny because he was obviously struggling. But it's interesting. Rob Heady, the copycat, he was the same way. He was a PTSD veteran, and he jumped onto a plane. I forget where it was, but he jumped onto a plane somewhere, and he jumped out. Now Rob Heady's the one. He was found because his bumper sticker had a skydiving bumper sticker parked on the side of the road. So they just waited for him to come out of the woods or whatever. Hands up. It's like, oh man. So, Heinemann jumped into the jungle. Heinemann jumped into the jungle of Honduras at night and lived. Okay, so I mean, the copycats are. It is fascinating when you read Norjack. Himmelsbach mentions that. Himmelsbach says he was shook when I guess the first one would have been LaPointe. When LaPointe was successful, and then McNally, it really shook him to the core. He said, this guy's a dead man. Cooper could not have survived. But then he goes, oh, crap. These guys lived. Cooper may have lived. So at least Himmelsbach was honest. And what's interesting is, as gruff as Himmelsbach was, he was not 100% no pull like Larry Carr, right? Himmelsbach says, I have several articles of him saying, I think it's 50-50.
I think that's how his book ends. I think there's a good chance he died and a good chance he lived.
Yeah, and so, but of course, Himmelsbach's happy that he didn't get the money. That's his thing. Well, Tina borrowed money, and it's good evidence that he didn't. It's good evidence, right? What's interesting about the copycats is I'm going to hit on this too. Is I did some research recently about the copycats, and I found a list of the aliases used. So we're talking about the Dan Cooper name, right? So
Richard I know McCoy used James Johnson.
That's right. Heinemann used George Ames, A-M-E-S.
Okay.
Martin McNally used Robert Wilson, and Richard LaPointe used John Shane. Now, Rob Heady did not have an alias because he ran onto the tarmac and just ran onto the plane as it was boarding. So he never bought a ticket, so he didn't have an alias, right? But yeah, John Shane, James Johnson, George Ames, Robert Wilson, D.B. Cooper. I don't know. I still think Cooper. I don't know where George Ames comes from. That's interesting. I mean, Robert Wilson, James Johnson, those are pretty generic. But George Ames, Heinemann's a weird dude. I don't know about Heinemann.
What do you think of him as a suspect? I have a lot of respect for Flyjack.
Yep, me too.
The utmost respect for him, but he never seems to give us anything about Heinemann.
He claims he has. Flyjack. I mean, me and him. If you've been on Drop Zone lately, now that
I'm on Drop Zone every day.
Well, now that I'm not lurking, I get into it with Flyjack. Sometimes. Flyjack and me go back and forth, and I don't like. No, Heinemann's terrible. Heinemann. I mean, look, Heinemann. Think about this. Heinemann hijacks a plane 2 miles from where he lives. Okay, literally in the same his hometown. We know that. Okay, Heinemann does not wear sunglasses. Heinemann is wearing his glasses during the hijacking. Heinemann is literally putting a pistol in people's guts. People look at him. He goes, "I'll blow your head off." Like he's shoving his little pistol into the gut of a stewardess, saying he's going to shoot her through the gut. I mean, these crazy things, right? That is not D.B. Cooper. Like not even remotely, at all. I mean, so he's going to wear sunglasses to Norjack. But now suddenly he's going to hijack a plane 2 miles from his home, wearing his glasses, not sunglasses, just wearing his glasses, no disguise at all. Heinemann didn't disguise. Heinemann was hanging out like at the restaurant, at the hotel, just like shooting the shit with people. Like Heinemann he clearly had some mental problem when he did this, and I think that when he was arrested and convicted, they knew that because Heinemann only spent like 8 years in custody, I think, and he was released. It's interesting that most of the copycats were released pretty quickly. Heady and LaPointe didn't spend more than 10 years in prison. Heinemann didn't. Now, McNally, of course, we know about McNally. He kept trying to escape, and that kept adding on to his sentence. And McNally was just a misfit. I like Mark McNally. I wish McNally had come to CooperCon or something. I'd love to meet him.
At one point, he was going to come on this show right after he did the other one.
Really?
But it just fell apart at some point. I could try reaching out to him again. Shutter, Dave.
Yeah.
he helped me out with get in contact with him because he was like, yeah, I would do it. And I emailed him. He's like, yeah, I'll do it. You just give me a couple of weeks. And
Yeah.
then I reached back out to him and never got a hold of him again.
Oh, well,
Because I
try
loved
again.
that series he did.
Oh, it was amazing.
American
Skyjacker.
American Skyjacker. That's what it was. Yes.
As soon as
That
people
was a
listen
great
to,
series.
as soon as people listen to Darren's catalog in full, they should go listen to American Skyjacker after they've listened to every Cooper Vortex episode, of course.
Oh, there's a bunch of great shows. There is a series called Death in the West that just did a 4-part series on Richard McCoy. And it
really
gets into DB Cooper a little bit, but that is a phenomenal series. I would recommend that to anyone. If you believe McCoy is Cooper, I'd recommend it. If you don't think McCoy is Cooper, you'll still enjoy it because I sure did.
Yeah, McCoy is interesting.
They're not pitching McCoy as Cooper in this.
Sure.
They're saying it's possibility that McCoy's Cooper, but here's McCoy's whole badass amazing
this is
story.
His story. Yeah, he's fine of him. He is the real McCoy by himself. He doesn't need to be Cooper. Richard McCoy is fascinating. I mean, this is a guy who grows up like being kind of puny and made fun of a little bit because he was a Southerner living in the North, and he goes and becomes Billy Badass in Vietnam. I mean, he is highly decorated. I guess I would have to look at Braden's. Yeah, I guess Braden's got probably more on him, but I mean, McCoy is very highly decorated. I mean, this is a guy who flew combat missions by himself. He would jump in these choppers by himself, fly off, and like shoot rockets at the North Vietnamese and things. He was a great pilot. I think his wife basically described him as an adrenaline junkie, essentially. And once he wanted to go back for a third tour of Vietnam, but his wife was like, I will divorce you if you do that. So he was like, okay.
He did some sport jumping once he got back to the States.
That's right. So, he had to get his kicks somewhere. And I think he got it during the hijacking. And then he breaks out of jail, escapes twice, right? And then goes on the run and, gets blown away by a 12-gauge shotgun right through his chest, by, I think his name's John O'Hara, the FBI agent who's still around. Nick O'Hara. That's it. Nick O'Hara just said freeze. And I think basically McCoy did suicide by cop, basically. It's my take on it. Because McCoy told his buddy, Melvin Walker, I think, was his buddy, his guy he escaped with. He said, look, if we encounter the feds, I'm just going to get killed because I'm not going back to prison. And then Melvin, his partner, said, well, I'm going to throw my hands up. I don't want to die. McCoy didn't care anymore. And I found a picture recently of McCoy in his casket. He was buried in his Army uniform. Have you seen that picture?
I have not.
I'll text that to you. Yeah, he was buried in his military uniform, holding a Book of Mormon in his hands.
I definitely need to see that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll text you that when we're done here. Yeah. Pretty cool. But yeah, McCoy's fascinating. I love McCoy, but he's not Cooper, but he's cool enough. And I actually found an article I posted on the Facebook group. You see, I think the McCoy people, they have this idea that his hijacking is too similar to Cooper's, right? So it must be the same guy. But here's the thing. I found an article, an AP article no less, which means it went to hundreds of papers. There's an AP article 2 days after the skyjacking where a Boeing representative goes, oh yeah, 727s are easy to jump. You go right down. The engines wouldn't bother you. This guy who hijacked our plane, he told the pilots 15 degrees flaps, 200 miles an hour, and basically gave away how to pull off a Cooper skyjacking. Talked about the flaps. Oh, the gear down. He said, if you put the gear down, flaps down, and go a certain speed, that's what Cooper did. And this is an AP article in hundreds of papers, right? So McCoy, it's no great mystery that McCoy did the exact same thing because he read it in a paper, right? He goes, oh, so that's how it's done. You put the gear down, put the flaps down, go this speed, and voila. So no, there's no mystical quality to McCoy doing it.
What about the theory that I constantly push that what if McCoy knew Cooper?
Okay, well, if it was a McVie guy, perhaps, which possible. If it was Braden, maybe. I mean, who knows? Braden is such a mystery. Who the hell knows what Braden's up to?
If I saw a picture of Ted Braden and McCoy,
it's done.
In one picture. Okay, fine. Case closed. Ted Braden that's obviously Cooper.
That's all you would need with Teddy B. Braden. That's all you need. Speaking of which, I'll go back to Braden. I mentioned who was the most decorated Cooper suspect. So I found out. Drew got Braden's DD-214, which is his military discharge paper from World War II. So we looked at the dates on it. So Ted Braden joined the 101st Airborne when he was 15 years old. Drew had it as 16. I said, "Oh, Drew, look at this. He was 15 when he joined the 101st Airborne. He turned 16 during the war. But so Braden's entire experience in World War II, because after D-Day, we were only in Europe for about 10 months before the end. Okay, so Ted Braden's entire World War II experience in Europe is during the age of 16. Okay, Ted Braden turned 17 like 3 months after the war is over in Europe. So his entire wartime experience, he's 16 years old. His DD-214, he has 3 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts at 16 years old. So Braden's a bad dude, clearly. 16 years old. So it's like, wow, that's a child, basically.
I was playing Tony Hawk.
Yeah,
at 16 years
exactly.
old.
Well, I told Drew, I said, look, Ted Braden as Cooper would be like a great Tarantino movie, right? Yeah, this because it's so ADD. It's like you have this 16-year-old child soldier who becomes a skydiving, expert, demonstration going around Europe. You have this, and then you have him, going to the Congo after Vietnam. He's accused of murdering a guy, right? Goes to the Congo, the CIA come get him. All this things, right? And then he's DB Cooper, right? It's like a Tarantino movie, right? Perfect. In the 70s, 60s, be great, and then, so it'd be cool. So Braden, like I said, Braden's the only suspect who I'm going to say that Cooper is somebody we've never heard of. But Braden is, if I had a bet, if I had to bet all my money, I would take a Vegas prop bet that a 5% chance that Braden was Cooper, against the field, right, as they say. Braden is really intriguing and is kind of a jerk, I think he was respectful to people. And if you read about him in Vietnam, he would wear a sweater, he'd smoke a pipe. He was very esoteric in a lot of things. He fancied himself an intellectual in a way.
Well, in Vietnam, he was a lot older than the other dudes.
That's right. He was a World War II guy in Vietnam. Now, he was a young World War II guy, but he was still, he was 40. He was, Ted would have been, he was late 30s when he got out of Vietnam. But like I said, it helped Ted a lot that his best buddy was the head of the CIA, John Singlaub. That was his get out of jail free card. And it's almost like a movie plot. We have all these things. I have evidence where I have found newspaper clippings of Ted being arrested for 3 different robberies, high stakes robberies, arrested for these things, and he's never convicted. He's just on to the next thing. It's like, wait a second. So what's going on here? And it's weird. It's like, it's almost like something out of Rambo or some movie where the guy comes into the jail cell. Hey, we need you to do a job for us and we'll let you go. Right. Because there is evidence that Braden was working for the CIA even into the 80s. There were reliable sources who said that people who worked for the CIA saying that they saw Braden in, I believe, Panama during the whole Iran-Contra sort of stuff. Right. And that was in the late 80s. So, and Braden is a weird dude, I've got software that I use for my law firm to look up people and clients and things for information and things. And you look up Ted Braden on there, nothing. He is a ghost. He doesn't even have an address listed. Okay. Whereas Comrade Rekka has everywhere he's lived since 1960 on there. But Ted Braden is nothing. It's just a name, Ted Braden. It's like, whoa. That's creepy. It's like, that's what a CIA guy looks like, is that dude, but Ted Braden's fascinating. But McCoy, going back to McCoy, there's no mystery of how McCoy did this jump. He read about it in the paper and tried it and ended up getting suicided by a cop, by Nick O'Hara, with a 12-gauge shotgun. And that was the end of him. And he got buried with the Book of Mormon in a army uniform.
The thing about McCoy, if I'm talking to someone and they're like, I think it's McCoy. Right away, my first thought is, okay, you don't know much about the case. You watched one thing and made your decision based entirely on that.
That's right.
Because I've read dozens of books now at this point, and I have no doubt that McCoy is not Cooper.
No.
There's so much information to discredit him.
Yeah.
and not really any information that says it is him. I mean, you have a confession from a family member, but
That's no.
unfortunately, in this case, that means absolutely
Nothing.
nothing.
It means less than nothing. Yeah.
Why are there so
It's
many confessions?
it's an easy thing to confess to, because if you're not Cooper, then there's nothing to worry about. You know, they're not going to convict you if you're not Cooper. So it's an easy thing to confess to. It's a very machismo thing to confess to. I mean, you're confessing to being the coolest criminal of all time, right? I mean, you're not confessing to knocking off Piggly Wiggly, in 1974,
No.
with some fake pistol in your pocket,
I don't brag to my friends that I was the Lover's Lane killer.
Right, right. And so, and also too, you're not claiming that you're the Zodiac killer either, right? I mean, I don't know any Zodiac confessions. I mean, there might be some. I'm not a Zodiac expert, but I mean, do people confess to being the Zodiac killer? I mean, maybe, I don't know, but I mean, there's nothing. No one goes, "Oh my God, you were DB Cooper. How dare you?" Right? What a horrible person you are. So it's a safe thing to confess to. And I don't know. I guess you're just telling people that you were the coolest guy ever. And that's the thing about Rekka. It fits Rekka's personality to say this garbage. To me, it fits his cosplaying. It's the ultimate thing, right? It's the ultimate cosplay. Oh, by the way, I was DB Cooper. I'm dead. Like, it's so, for a guy who likes to pretend it's something. It is that. And then you have these people who their family members. I don't know why Barb Dayton said that. I don't know why she told the Foremans that, because they genuinely believe it. They
You don't believe Barb is Cooper?
I do not. No, absolutely not. There's no. I mean, there's just no. I mean, Barb was a sailor. In the war, and I don't think she was even in the service. I mean, she was in the Merchant Marine, which I guess is a service. But they can say, "Oh, Barb was a rough and tumble guy," but I mean, I don't know of any evidence at all. I mean, even the circumstantial evidence is not there for Barb. It's just, well, she told us she was a pilot of small planes. Okay, well, so what? That means nothing. I mean, growing up, my father had a plane. That didn't mean anything. We had a Piper, Warrior growing up, and that doesn't mean he was DB Cooper. It doesn't mean anything. So no, Barb is not Cooper. But I don't know why Barb chose to say that. Barb's an interesting person, and I've heard you say many times Barb would be the coolest Cooper. No doubt about it. I mean, that would be the single coolest DB Cooper would be Barb Dayton.
And the most Portland story of all time.
It's Portlandia. It's
it
beautiful. It's beautiful. I mean, it is perfect. And I mean, the thought of Cooper putting on a wig as soon as she hits the ground is just fascinating. It's cool to think about, right? But there's no evidence there. And Kenny Christensen is a joke of a suspect. I mean, think about this. I tell people all the time people promote Kenny sometimes on the Facebook page, not as often as it used to be. Kenny was a hot commodity there for a while, right?
He was. When I first got into this case.
Yeah.
I read Skyjack first, which sort of points to Kenny a little bit, and then it leads into the Blast.
Into the Blast,
right? Second book I read.
Yeah.
And I put that book down and I was like, okay, well, I know who DB Cooper was. It was Kenny Christensen.
Right.
And then the third book I read was Bruce Smith's. And so I was like, oh, well, it's not Kenny Christensen.
No, it's not.
Actually, no, that's not true. I got on the forums after reading Blevins' book, and Georgia and Bruce were on there just tearing Blevins apart. And I was like, okay, they're making a good point here. And I think it's not Kenny Christensen anymore.
No,
which is probably when I really fell in, because I was like, well, if it's not the guy,
then who?
Then who?
Then who? Yeah. No, Kenny's terrible. And I'll tell you why Kenny's terrible. So there was a chance. Okay, Kenny was, for those who don't know, Kenny Christensen was a flight attendant for Northwest Orient. A purser, which is what Alice Hancock was. Alice Hancock was a purser. Okay. So that means that Kenny would have handled first class, essentially, on these flights. Kenny would have been the head flight attendant. There was a chance, a literal chance, that when Kenny hands Flo the note, Flo would have gone, "Kenny, is that you?" Like, oh, what a funny prank. Bill and Scotty are up at the front. Go say hey to them, Kenny. This is funny. I mean, there's a good chance that could have happened. He didn't know. If it had been Kenny, he would not have known who I mean, I guess he could have figured it out, maybe, I guess, but he would not have known who the flight crew were that day. You know, who was going to be on there. I mean, it's ludicrous to think that he hijacked his own airline, like, and continued to work for that airline.
And continued to work there for like 10 years or something afterward.
And look, Tina eventually, I know that Kenny worked international mainly. Okay. He worked international flights in Asia. And I do believe that Tina Mucklow transitioned into international. I believe that's in the Rolling Stone article. She says that I worked domestically for a while, and I eventually had enough seniority to get the international flights, which I guess required seniority because you're going overseas, and that's kind of, it's like a vacation, right? So that's probably why Kenny had it, because he was a purser. He was, you know. So Tina Mucklow probably, she may have worked with Kenny Christensen, for all we know. Now, she's never said that, but I mean, Tina doesn't say a lot, you know? I mean, I think there's a good chance that Tina might have worked with. I mean, so no, you don't hijack. You know, to be crude about it, you don't shit where you eat. And Cooper ain't doing that. Cooper was too clever to do that. I mean, no, Kenny's a joke. And I mean, who knows what Kenny's secret was, right? Remember, you know, on his deathbed, he didn't confess to being Cooper. That's the thing. Kenny is not a deathbed confessor. Kenny said, "I have something I must tell you," or something, right?
Right.
That's not a confession of being D.B. Cooper.
Right. And some people believe he was going to tell his brother that he was gay.
That's what I would think. That's my theory. I would think about that too. And that's my thought, is probably so. Especially of that era, that would be something. But I mean, he could have been saying, "Hey, I was Bozo the Clown on WGN, you know, for 20 years." I mean, who knows what he's going to say, right? I mean, he could have said anything. But he didn't say it was D.B. Cooper. That was all an inference by his brother. I believe Larry Carr, I don't want to misrepresent Larry, but I believe Larry said that the only thing that Cooper has in common with Kenny Christensen is that Kenny Christensen and Cooper had male genitalia. That's it. Like, that's the only thing they had in common. Like, there's just no, and I believe Kenny, and, you know, I don't know. I don't think so. And the other suspects out there, I'm trying to think who else are notable, because we talked about McCoy and Recca and Christensen.
Confessions. Dwayne confessed.
Yeah, and Dwayne, again, you know, Joe Weber's full of crap, but Tim's not. You know, I believe Tim's research is accurate. I have no reason to doubt it, right? And if that's the case, then yeah, Dwayne was a shady character, no doubt about it. I mean, having multiple identities, that's odd. I mean, that's interesting behavior, okay? But he's too big too. I think Dwayne's like 6'2" and kind of heavy. He was a big fellow.
He seems like a big, thick guy.
He was a big, thick guy, and he had the hair. And, you know, going back to the hair, you know, talking about Gregory's, the marcelled hair, right? I mean, he did have the marcelled hair. Gregory says his hair. Gregory says several things. It's weird. Gregory says his hair's marcelled. I think Gregory says his hair looks like President Nixon's hair. Gregory also says that it looks like a George Raft gangster movie hair, which I had to Google George Raft, and this is some like, yeah, see, like one of those, you know, 1930s gangster movies, right? So it's like really slick, greasy hair. Which again, you go back to the hair, something was off-putting about Cooper's hair. It looked ugly, gross, black, like greasy, awful. I mean, these are all words that people have used for his hair. Awful, greasy, like jet black. Something drew attention. His hair drew attention. And my thinking is his hair may have been dyed. I believe that it's possible that Cooper is older than people think, given that Flo said he's in his 50s, given that his hair may have been dyed. And also maybe, look, this is complete speculation on my part. This is I'm not going in the aliens theory route, but this is a weird route to go on. It's a theory.
I'm ready.
That I think that the Stews, as we discussed earlier, they weren't afraid of Cooper. Seemingly, they didn't seem to be physically afraid of him. Like, you know, if they had been, look, if I don't believe, think about this, if this was Heinemann, okay, who had a pistol and had been telling passengers, "I'm gonna blow your heads off," you know, and then the passengers got off the plane, I don't think Flo and Alice are sauntering back there saying, "Hey, what you doing? Where you taking us?" to Heinemann, right? They're probably staying as far away from that maniac as possible. My thought. So it's possible Cooper was older and they sensed that he was harmless in a way, physically harmless. Like, I mean, you know, people have energy, right? We can feel people's countenances, their energy. And I don't think Cooper had an ugly energy. Tina says as much, right? He was never cruel, kind. He was not unkind or nasty or mean. He was polite in every way. I don't think that they were, and there's nothing in the evidence to suggest that he was mean to anybody. Flo was scared of him initially, but obviously she calmed down at some point, because at some point she leaves the cockpit when they land in Seattle and goes back there and talks to him.
Yeah, and if he was violent at any point, the FBI would have made sure to point that out all the time.
Yeah. That, hey, this is they always say armed and dangerous, but that's what they say in their files. But if he was a violent person, and they say that, they're like, when they point out that this was his first crime, they think his profile says his first crime. What they're saying is that, yeah, this guy's not dangerous, really. He's not some hoodlum, I guess, as to use Flo's word. Like Flo said, he's not a hoodlum. He wasn't a hoodlum. He was a gentleman, basically, an executive. He, was polite, and he offered them money, and I think he felt bad hijacking the plane. Cooper is, offering them. He ordered them meals. I don't think Heinemann's ordering anybody any meals.
Did you listen to the last episode I did with Robert Fuller?
I did.
What did you think of his profile?
Okay, so Gossett is interesting. Look, my only problem with Wolfgang is that he's a blowhard. He talks too much. I don't think that's a trait of Cooper. Cooper is not, in my opinion, Cooper is not a blowhard. Gossett was a media hound. He liked the spotlight. He did his exorcisms and things. He had a radio show. D.B. Cooper did not have a radio show. That's not his personality. No. So, but Gossett has things going for him, for sure. No doubt about it. And again, his son, is it Greg Gossett?
Right, Greg.
Yeah. He seems earnest in his belief that these things happened.
But outside of the fact that he's leaning heavily towards Gossett, what did you think of his criminal profile that he'd put together?
I don't like it. I don't. I just don't like it. His saying that Cooper would have had some attachment to the tie is, I almost was like, what are you talking about, man? I believe he said something about like Cooper would have cared more about his tie than his money. It's like, what? And then, his whole like making an anagram of Cooper for like the family members. It's too much. It's too much. Again, Occam's razor here. Occam's razor is, look, as a criminal defense attorney, all of my clients, they can tell me stories, or you'll see where they'll tell the cops. When I get the evidence, when I get my discovery on a felony case, and I'm defending somebody, I see what they told the cops, and then I will tell my client what's the truth, because that's bullshit. Like, your elaborate story of how you're innocent. It's always some story. It's too elaborate to be the truth. The truth is you just sold drugs to somebody and got caught. Okay, that's what it is. So tell me the truth of this, right? Or it's not. There's nothing too elaborate about this thing. He was a guy who went on a plane. There's no mystery. The Dan Cooper name maybe has significance, maybe not. I did some research though. I don't think it's as common as people think. I went on Find a Grave, okay, and I typed in, and it's not scientific, of course, but I typed in Dan and Daniel Cooper in Find a Grave for people born before 1950. That was I just said born before 1950 who have gravestones, I guess, right? And there's only 1,000 of them, in America. So that's not a lot. I bet if I put James Johnson in Find a Grave, or Scott Wilson or whatever, right? There'd be a lot more. Or Robert Wilson or whatever that name was that McNally used. Be a lot more than Dan Cooper. So it's not as common as people think it is. But yeah, the criminal profile.
Do you think he chose the name based on the comic book?
Okay, so here we go. We can talk about this. So I found a few months ago another Dan Cooper in fiction. I was just cruising. I was like, this name Dan Cooper sounds weird. So there's a great site for people who need to know. It's called archive.org. It's free. You have to sign up for it, but it's got everything. It's got books on there too. So like, it's got books that are out of print that are free, and you can like borrow them for like an hour or whatever, right? And you can read through them. So like Norjack is on there. Tusaw's book's on there. The Real McCoy book by Rhodes and Calumet is on there. A lot of out of print DB Cooper books are on there that you can just read for yourself online. But I did a search for Dan Cooper before 1970, 71, right? So my search parameters were, I said, are there any other Dan Coopers in fiction other than the comic book, other than the Tintin guy? So I'm going through, and now most of the results, there is a Dan Cooper who was an interior designer of note, apparently. So 80% of things you come across for Dan Cooper before 1970 is this interior designer. So you have to go through a lot of these, you have to scroll through a lot of interior design articles and things to get to, it's like, oh God, more articles about rugs and things. It's like,
maybe
okay.
the hijacking was done because he didn't like the way Dan Cooper designed his living room. So I'm going to get that guy back. I'm going to frame him for a skyjacking.
That would be amazing. That's interesting. So that's the Dan Cooper I keep coming across. So I'm scrolling. Then I come across a 1937 pulp action hero, American, Dan Cooper. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I'm like, what is this? So I look at it, and it is a short story written by a guy about a airline pilot named Dan Cooper. Okay, it's like, okay. And in this story, his plane, he's flying his like passenger plane, and there are these like rogue guys in like aircraft who come up and start like shooting. They start like dropping grenades on his airliner, and he crash lands his airliner in some like stormy night, sort of thing, right? He crashes his airliner and gets out and starts like fist fighting with these bandits that like for some reason they land their planes after he crashes his plane, and he gets out and like brawls with them and beats them up, right? But the interesting thing about this Dan Cooper is that his name is used as a literary device. Okay, so it's not just his name is Dan Cooper. The way that this short story is written is Dan Cooper did that. Dan Cooper did this. It is an 8-page short story, and I looked it up. Dan Cooper, saying the words Dan Cooper is in there 50 times. So in 8 pages of a story, Dan Cooper, that phrase Dan Cooper is in there 50 times. It's like, wow. So it's Dan Cooper did this. Dan Cooper laughed. Dan Cooper smiled. Dan Cooper threw a punch. It's like, okay. So, and this is 1937. So if Cooper is an older guy, let's just say Cooper was 50 or so, or even 48. He's born in 1922 or something, right? He'd have been 14 or 15 when this magazine comes out. It was in an aviation magazine, this short story. It's in like an aviation magazine. It had like rockets and things you could build. Like you could build your own rockets at home. It looks like it was geared toward teenagers, this magazine. It's called Air Trails. It was a nationally published magazine about aviation. And it had this story in there. And so if DB Cooper is in his late 40s, maybe, he'd have been the right age to have read this. Now think about this. During the Depression, media is limited, right? I mean, not that just the Depression. Look, think about when we were growing up. I mean, we read through the same magazines all the time.
All the time.
Like, oh, these were my magazines. I own these magazines. These are my magazines. And I'm going to read through the same magazine a dozen, 20, 30 times, right? This is my little magazine. This is in the 90s, right? I mean, before the internet, your media options were limited. So if you had a magazine, I'm gonna look through it every day. So do that. Apply that to the 1930s, right? If you owned this magazine, per se, if you say, you're gonna read through this a lot. I mean, how many? If you're some Depression kid, 1937, how many magazines do you have? Right? Probably not many. And it's interesting too, the page right before, so like the Dan Cooper is on like, for example, like page 28 of this magazine, page 27. So on the same page of it, the front side of the page 27 is about a parachute rescue. So it's like somebody parachuted and got caught in like somebody parachuted and got caught in like the wing of an aircraft, and like the pilot, this is a true story. The pilot of this aircraft, like an open air, biplane, climbs out of his aircraft and frees this person, and then jumps back in behind the controls. So it's like this cool story, So
That's a bad dude.
his name was Clyde Pangborn. Now Clyde Pangborn was from Spokane. Okay, the real guy who did this rescue, Clyde Pangborn, is from Spokane, Washington. Okay, the page after the Cooper story ends is a Clyde Pangborn interview with this guy who did this parachute rescue thing, right, from Spokane. So if our Cooper suspect is native to Washington, perhaps they would have wanted this magazine that featured local Washington aviator hero guy, right? I don't know. And if they had gotten that article, if they had gotten that magazine, they would have come across Dan Cooper. So again, I don't know. The Dan Cooper 1010 is really on the nose. It's really on the nose. I mean, I've heard you say before, it's like the Tony Hawk, right? If you use Tony Hawk as an alias and then skateboard it away from a crime scene, it's so on the nose. It's like, oh man. But again, we don't have to, you'll see people with suspects trying to figure out a way that they would have come across the Dan Cooper 1010 comic, right? Oh, well, he spent time in France and he went to Quebec one weekend or something, So now when I found this Dan Cooper pulp action hero guy, that is an American article that an American kid would have come across in the 1930s. When DB Cooper was a child, this is something that he could have come across.
Right. You don't need to say, oh, this is a reason he would have been in France in 1955.
Not at all. We can just assume, we can just say, well, maybe he came across this, So it's on the nose, but I mean, the Cooper comic is on the nose, but I don't know. I mean, it could just be an alias. Maybe he had a friend named Don Cooper or something. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this. I think you're qualified to answer this question. If Cooper's still alive today and he comes forward, a 94-year-old man, and he says, it was me, here's my ticket stub and a $20 bill, could you prosecute him?
Oh, you could. And you could, so if he confessed to it and had the $20 bills, yes, he could be tried and convicted, and he would be convicted. I mean, with that evidence, he would be convicted. Now, again, prosecutors, as a former prosecutor, I know this, prosecutors have prosecutorial discretion. Okay. We can dismiss murder charges just like that on a whim, even, right? We have complete discretion. So if he was indicted, a prosecutor could dismiss it and say, well, I'm not doing this. I'm not, so there's a difference in prosecuting somebody and convicting somebody. Like, would they even prosecute him? I don't know. They closed the case, I guess. So, there'd be some, I don't think that they would prosecute somebody who didn't have the $20 bill, right? I mean, if it was a slam dunk, then yeah, they could prosecute him, but I would not be able to defend him because he confessed. So, it's like, he's basically pleading guilty on the front end, right? So now, if he did not confess, then yeah, no, Cooper would not be hard to beat. That would not be a hard case to win as a defense attorney if it was somebody who was being charged on some kind of circumstantial evidence or something. No, they would not. But just and again, why would they do this? Why would they even prosecute DB Cooper at this point? I guess they, the John Doe indictment's still out there, but I don't know. That would kind of be a almost jerkish thing to do in a way.
And if he's 93 years old, how long is this process going to take?
Yeah, that too. Well, look, I guess people would point out the fact it's a totally different thing, right? They are prosecuting 100-year-old Nazi war criminals, right? They're 100 years old, and literally, people were like 98 years old and they're being prosecuted. They're found by whoever, and they were concentration camp guards, right? And they're prosecuting them and convicting them, and they put them in prison. So, but Cooper it's like finding Bigfoot or something. Like it would be it's like if they found Bigfoot and just somebody shot him in the head. Like, it's like, wait a second, why are we doing this? Don't we need to, I think he would become it's interesting to fantasize about that. What would happen if an old man came up and said, hey, it was me? I don't think they would, that'd be a question for Larry Carr, I guess, but they could prosecute him. Hell yeah, they could. But would they? I think people would be mad about wasting resources on that, right? Why are we wasting? Why are we spending resources prosecuting? Why are we clogging the court system up with this? This is stupid. Okay, he got away with it. Yeah, somewhere from hell or heaven, Himmelsbach is shaking his fist at him. You rascal, he's mad at him somewhere. Himmelsbach, wherever Himmelsbach is now, he'd be mad at him. But who would be mad at DB Cooper, right? The thing about Cooper is, look, as a prosecutor, victims are important. Okay, victims are really important because the victims are the ones saying, prosecute this man. He killed my sister. He killed my mother. He robbed me. All right. It's a lot of it is victim based. There's nobody screaming for justice on DB Cooper. Nobody is out there going, prosecute him. Tina Mucklow would go, I don't give a damn, probably, right? I don't care. That'd be an interesting question to ask Bill Mitchell at CooperCon. Say, would you want him prosecuted? He could have blown you up, right? Maybe, would you want him prosecuted? I suspect he'd say no. Probably.
I suspect he would say no as well.
Yeah, I'm going to ask him that when I see him next month. I'm going to remember to ask him, would you be down for DB Cooper being prosecuted? I suspect he'd say no, and I bet Tina would probably say no. I wonder about Bill Radicek. He might go, yeah, prosecute though. He seems to have a different opinion of Cooper a little bit. It clearly affects him a lot. Sometimes you see Bill cry every time he mentions Tina, right? Which I think is very sweet. I do love Bill, but I don't know. Bill might say it's been a long time, and hey, is what it is. So I don't know. That's a good question. I'm going to ask Bill Mitchell that question when I see him next month. I will do that. Yeah.
Let me ask you another law question here. I'm putting together a book and a presentation and a documentary, and I'm going to point to your grandfather as being DB Cooper. It comes out in 2 weeks. Is there any risk I'm taking legally doing that?
No. Okay. Well, theoretically, yes. Practically, no. Okay. So basically, your reputation does not succeed you after you die. Okay. So whatever value your reputation has ends when you die. So the family would have to make a claim. Now, here's the thing about defamation cases. Defamation cases rely on several things. The statement has to be false, and the person making the statement has to know it's false, right? If I am accusing, Billy Bob McGee of doing this, it would have to be proven that I knew it was BS, right? That I knew it was a false statement. It would have to be proven that, okay? So, and how could you even make that argument that somebody, that this researcher who wrote this book about your grandfather, how would you even go about saying that they know it's fake, right? You couldn't do that. So it has to be, defamation is an out of court. It's basically it's a statement that is made that the person has to know is false. Second, you have to show how you're damaged by it. How is Billy Bob McGee's grandson Skeeter damaged by me saying that his granddad was Cooper, right? No, you're not. You can be offended by it, but no, there's no defamation there because there's no injury, I guess. A defamation has to cause an injury of some sort. I can't get a job now because they said I, raped a dancer at a strip club or something, right? I can't get a job because some girl at my, whatever it is. I can't get a job because they say I robbed a bank, right? Whatever it is, where somebody could slander you really harmfully, right? It has to be shown that it's actually hurting you or has the likelihood to hurt you in the future. So no, there is no, some charlatan lawyer could file a complaint, sure. But again, lawyers who do that sort of stuff get paid on the back end of something, right? They're not getting paid up front generally. So they require money. Lawyers who take on personal injury lawyers, you get in a car wreck, right? They don't get paid, I don't get paid till I win for you, right? That sort of stuff, right? Well, it's the same way. It'll be the same way in this. A lawyer would have to, have a reason to do this. Have a motive to help somebody sue somebody for their. It's all no. Yes, like I said, theoretically, yes, you could file. You can file a complaint on almost anything. You can go to court and file a complaint about whatever. Doesn't mean it's going to get heard by a judge or anything. A judge might kick it out for being a frivolous lawsuit, and I suspect that might be what happens if somebody did that. A judge would say this is frivolous because you weren't injured by this guy saying your grandfather did this. It's no. So no, that is not something that I would be concerned about if I were to bring up a suspect at CooperCon in a month. I would not at all be worried about injuring somebody's grandchildren or whatever. It's just not, no.
All right, let me ask you a question you're totally unqualified to answer. How did the money get to Tina Barr?
I don't know. Moving on. I have no idea, man. God almighty. I wish Tina Barr had never happened. I hate it. I hate it like a rock in my shoe. I hate it. It is the worst thing to talk about because it's just, I mean, I can't even speculate. Like it's not even like, I have no idea. I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would speculate that, Cooper would have to land near there for one thing. Like, for a while there, I thought that maybe the road that led north up from Tina Barr went somewhere, but it dead ends, apparently. It's like a Highway 506 or it's got some name to it, right?
There's a railway that runs from Ariel directly to Tina Barr.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hadn't thought about that. I didn't know that. So my thought for a while was that, okay, maybe Cooper buried it there because, it would have been reasonable for Cooper to assume there would have been roadblocks, right? So whenever Cooper gets back to his vehicle, it's reasonable thought that there might be roadblocks looking for him. And oops, you got $200,000 in your trunk and a parachute. Come with us, son. You're toast, right? So, it's not unreasonable that Cooper would have buried it, right? I don't think so. But again, you've got the whole thing about the diatoms being in spring and, I don't know. Okay, so I don't know enough about the science of it. The only theory I can think of that makes any sense to me is that Cooper buried it the night of the hijacking, that he came back for it probably soon afterwards, maybe a week or two, maybe, I don't know. And just that night dropped some bundles or left some bundles accidentally in the ground, kicked some sand over it to cover the hole back up, right? He probably just covered the hole by kicking into it. Just kicked the sand over, right? Whatever. Or maybe shoveled it over, I don't know. And that maybe that sand was loose and the spring floods of 72, flooded the sandbar, and that's how the diatoms got in there. But I think Tom Kay has said that like the diatoms would not infiltrate sand. Is that your understanding?
That's what my understanding is. Like they'd have to be just kind of sandy on top, but
right,
because those diatoms don't crawl through what would be the giant rocks or boulders for them.
For them, a compacted sand, I guess, would be a problem. So maybe, but I don't know. Shoot. I am not opposed. This sounds crazy. This is the only thing that sounds crazy that I would promote. Maybe that's not the only thing that is not Occam's razor here is that it may have been a prank of some sort. Like I've had the thought recently, did Cooper know that Himmelsbach was going to retire right then? Himmelsbach was very active in the 70s. I found lots of articles of him. He was very active. He's the one that got the John Doe indictment. Himmelsbach is very active in media.
And the John Doe indictment was only a few months before the money was found, right?
No, it was in 76 because it was a 5-year.
Oh, okay.
It was a 5-year statute of limitations at the time. At the time the crime was committed. I think that they had amended that afterwards because hijacking became a capital offense. They could have executed people. So I think after Cooper, they changed the statute of limitations to whatever it was, but because Cooper committed his crime, the statute of limitations doesn't apply retroactively. So like a change in Cooper's statute of limitations was always going to be 5 years, regardless of what it became afterwards. So no, that was 76. So I don't know, man. Maybe somebody didn't like Himmelsbach and was like, "Hey, I don't know. That sounds so crazy. I just, God Almighty, I don't like Tina Barr. I don't like it.
I've said it a million times, but it only adds more questions. It doesn't provide a single answer.
No, and here's the thing: we're never going to know. I could solve DB Cooper tomorrow, and I am highly unlikely to ever figure out Tina Barr because Cooper's dead. Cooper's almost certainly dead. So unless I find a secret diary somewhere, right? Then Tina Barr is gonna. We could figure out Cooper next week, and Tina Barr is still gonna be what we're talking about 10 years from now. because I hate it.
Yeah, I think Marty was the one who told me, he's like, I think this could be solved and we still have no idea how the money got there.
Never.
Or even Cooper himself. How did that get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think talking about Tina Barr, we go back to the money, right? And I don't think the money was spent personally. The guy you had on your podcast convinced me of that. I can always say, well, I think that I don't agree with that guy, but like, look, that guy is a gazillion times more qualified than anybody who's talking about the DB Cooper regarding the money. And if he says those didn't show up, then I'm gonna believe him. And I think that Cooper saying that he wanted circulated currency, he was looking out for marked bills, right? He was aware that that was a possibility. So I think whenever he realized that the bills were marked, which I believe it may have been 10 days later that they mentioned it. We looked this up recently. I'm not sure how many days. It may have been 10 days later when they said to the media that the money was marked. Okay. So, being a cautious individual, he may have just been like, well, dadgummit, I guess I did it for nothing. They didn't go along with giving me the circulated currency. They gave me marked bills, them bastards, and oh, well, I guess they beat me. I guess they beat me this time. So I don't know, I think that, I don't think he spent it because I think he knew it was marked. And I think Cooper was a cautious person. But then again, there are people who say, well, Cooper could have gone to Missouri, and I don't know. The whole thing about the money is so stupid. Like, the bank tellers having this non-sequential list of 10,000 numbers. Could you imagine
the numismatist Albert? He explained it to me that made it seem like it would have been easy for the tellers to do that, because he was like, you have to remember 20 is equivalent to 100 today.
That's right.
And what they would have been looking for primarily was star bills and 69 and 63 Series A notes. And so if you're going through a stack of 20s and counting them or whatever, and then you notice 1 out of 17 of them, oh, that's a 69 Series A. I'll check that on the list real quick.
Or maybe all of these are star notes. Yeah. Maybe, right? All of these are 60. What a coincidence, right? Then I might go, okay, wait a second. So yeah, I guess so. But how long would they have done this?
Not long at all.
Days, maybe weeks. Yeah, it's just so. I don't know. It's possible he spent it. I mean, he could have laundered it to. I don't know. It's just Tina Barr sucks. The money sucks. It doesn't get me any closer to finding DB Cooper at all.
Do you think this was a highly planned, well thought out heist, or it was scribbled on a bar napkin that afternoon?
Well thought out. Absolutely. I mean, everything he did was clever. I mean, the bomb was clever, right? I mean, Himmelsbach called that a game changer, right? He said that is a clever, because basically they couldn't rush him. They couldn't rush onto the plane and have a gunfight with a guy with a bomb, because he'll just blow it up. So it negated any efforts to take him like that. Sitting in the back of the plane was smart. Whatever was in his mystery bag was thought out, and it wasn't spur of the moment. If you want to see a spur of the moment hijacking, you look up Rob Heady, who put a pillowcase with like holes in it, like some Jesse James bank robber, and he jumped over a fence and ran onto a plane and said, "This is a hijacking. You take off and give me some money." Now Heady's smart. Heady, in a way, though, Heady had his parachute. Heady was already wearing his parachute when he did this, so Heady had a small reserve chute under a windbreaker when he jumped the fence and ran onto the plane. So he was already wearing his parachute, which is interesting to me. It's a unique thing he did. But yeah, it was thought out. Hell yeah. I mean, of course it was. I mean, I think that him getting the money bag frustrated the hell out of him. Not having a knapsack. My thought is that with a knapsack, he would have worn it like a baby Bjorn in the front, right? He would have wore the backpack backwards, essentially. And all the parachute harness straps would have, kept it on him, right? So that makes sense. You want a knapsack. That, the bag, I mean, he seemed pretty upset about it. Now, it does give us some insight into who Cooper was, that he got the bag, because he kind of MacGyvered this bag really quickly. Tina seemed to be impressed by his pocket knife skills. He's MacGyvering this handle and a strap and all this other things for his bag. And that's interesting to me that and he's cutting parachute cords. I would not I can't do anything like that. I mean, I can't tie. I can tie my shoes, but that's the only knots I can tie. You know, Cooper is tying this. He's doing this really cool thing. And if you read the FBI profile, they say one thing I like about it is they say the subject manifests extreme inventiveness. So they thought he was smart. Okay, now they might have thought he was a wuffo and wasn't a good parachutist, but that is partly due to maybe some misinformation about the parachutes, which I'm not great about parachutes, but there's some stuff about the parachutes that maybe they were identical. That's something that I wish I could fix on the Wikipedia page. You know, the whole idea is that, you know, Cooper, the zeitgeist, going back to the zeitgeist says Cooper had a sport parachute to choose from and a military parachute, right?
Yep.
When in reality, if you look at the 302, there is a 302 that says that on the plane in Reno, it's an evidence thing, and it says there is an MB8 parachute on the plane. Okay, so now I know that MB8 just stands for what the container was, maybe, but that's still a Navy backpack. Now Norman Hayden, of course, says that Earl Cossey gave him identical parachutes. These were emergency bailout rigs, you know, they're intended not to be fancy, just to get me out of the plane if it's going to crash. And they were identical. Norman Hayden has said they were identical. So Cooper didn't have a choice of you know, a luxury rig, or, you know, and then you listen to Metzler, and he's saying, hey, Cooper chose the right parachute. You know, if he had a choice, he did choose the right one, because I mean, a sport parachute might have been blown apart at that speed, but the bailout rig, I mean, look, you've got I don't know how many tens of thousands of guys, maybe 100,000 in World War II total from all the countries that fought in World War II. How many guys jumped out of death spiraling aircraft, right, and survived just fine? Whereas Cooper is like basically on a diving board and just jumps off, you know, and just drops right down. I mean, you know, I challenge people to go look up on YouTube 727 jumps. There's lots of videos of guys jumping out of 727s. It looks so simple because there's no they just go right down, just like the Boeing guy said in 71. You'll just go right down. And these guys, they're so nonchalant. They're not spinning out of control when they jump. They're not like, whoa. You know, I mean, you know, Larry says, you know, he spins immediately, his shoes come flying off. He can't find the gigantic ripcord handle that's right there. Again, people, look up what an MB6, MB8 parachute looks like with somebody wearing it. The ripcord is this giant metal thing. You're not going to not find your ripcord. And I talked to Anonymous, Dave. You know, he's a skydiver. Dave's like, you know, if he was Cooper, he would have jumped with his hand already on the ripcord, just in case he spins out of control somehow. And again, those rigs were designed to, even if you are spinning out of control, like if you, for example, bail out of a B-17 that's crashing toward the earth, you're not going to be, you know, graceful exiting that thing, right? You're just getting the hell out of it. Or if your Mustang is spinning out of control over Germany, you're just going to jump out, right? And you're not going to be able to arc yourself. Those guys didn't learn about arcing their backs. Okay, they had a war to fight. They didn't have practice jumps. They didn't have practice jumps. Okay, a B-17 crew did not have a practice jump. They were shown
one classroom training session.
Correct. This is where it is. You pull. Period. Okay, and when you land on the ground, it's going to hurt like hell, but you'll be alive as your plane is in ruins a mile down the road on fire. You know, you'll still be alive. So if you break your ankle, you break your ankle, right? I don't know. I don't think they broke their ankle very much, because you read all these guys, they tried to elude the Germans. You know, when they would be shot down, they'd be on the run for a few days until some Hausfrau finds him sleeping in their barn, right? You know, so no, it's silly to think that he died in the jump, as we talk about that again. No, I don't. No.
Was his bomb real?
Okay, his bomb. That depends on who it is.
Well said.
All of your guests say no. And I'm always like, it depends on who it is. See, okay, consider this scenario, okay? And I've never heard anybody mention this about the bomb being real. Cooper clearly didn't want to kill people. I don't think he did. I don't think he wanted to kill anybody. He may have wanted to kill himself if he got compromised, okay? Think about this. So Cooper let's just say he's on the ground. I don't think he ever intended to blow the bomb in the air, because there's no need to do that, right? I mean, there's no FBI agents on the plane, right? I mean, nobody's going to assault the aircraft from the air. So there's never a reason to blow the bomb in the air. He knew that. He would have known that. But on the ground, after you release the passengers, there's no guarantee there's not a SWAT team going to come on the plane, right? Now, one thing about the bomb serves two purposes. If it was real, the bomb is going to kill yourself. Okay, so it's just because, I mean, you don't want to go to prison for life, right? It's going to kill yourself, but it's also going to blow you to bits. Okay, think about that. It's going to blow you to smithereens. There's no post-mortem photos. Who is this man, right? So there's no shame. Let's just say Cooper had a family to provide for. He was doing this to provide for his family. He would not want to bring shame to his family by either being captured or by being shot by an FBI agent and having his dead face photo on the front cover of the paper. Help us identify this dead man, right? So that would have brought shame to his family by being ID'd. Okay, blowing yourself up blows you up, right?
That's a very interesting angle to look at it.
Yeah. I don't. Again, it depends on who it is. Is it somebody who? I mean, I read Tina. The first time I've heard her say this, I believe it was in the HBO special. Tina says, "I'm not going to be taken alive." She says that Cooper said, something about I won't be taken alive or something like that. Tina says that. I believe it's an HBO special. I had never heard her say that. That's not in any 302s, I don't think. Cooper saying, I won't be taken alive. But she says that. So maybe he did. Maybe she's misremembered. I don't know. But that's what she says in the HBO special. So yeah, I think that it depends on who it is. Is it a guy who, under no circumstances, would have wanted to bring shame to his family, right? It's a lot easier to think dad just disappeared one weekend, like Lepsy or something, right? And yeah, you're leaving your family with questions. You're leaving your family with questions, and it's sad. But that might be better than my dad's face is my dad's face is on the cover of New York Times as a hijacker who got killed by an FBI agent. So blowing yourself up kind of solves that issue. But again, yes, I get all the arguments that it didn't need to be real. Obviously, I mean, he could have had a ham sandwich in there, and they said it's a bomb in here, and he could have not shown the bomb to flow, and it wouldn't have mattered. I don't think. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I don't think it even mattered. He showed her the bomb because, hey, I mean business, but he didn't need to show her the bomb even. They were going to give him what he wanted just by threatening. So yeah, it didn't need to be real from that angle. And I've seen people say, well, would he have jumped out of a plane with dynamite on him or whatever it was, right? Well, no, because I think, again, he could have chunked that briefcase out the aircraft somewhere between Seattle and Portland. And maybe the Sasquatch finds it, but nobody else is going to find that thing, right?
No, and I think it might have been found at this point.
Maybe.
I mean, it is hard to, but I mean, a lot of that area is hunted. People,
that's true.
Recreation. So much of that has been logged and replanted in the last few years, and construction, whatnot. I just think that if there was something laying out there in the woods,
yeah, you're right.
I think it would have been found by now. I mean, there are some things where it could have been found and nobody thought anything of it. Maybe the briefcase completely disintegrated and those were road flares and they just sort of melted into the earth. Yeah. And by the time someone saw it, they just kicked what they thought was a pile of garbage.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's the
but
same
if you
way
find
with
a parachute and a skeleton out in those woods,
yeah,
that's something everyone who walks around there is like, oh my God, it's DB Cooper.
Yeah, exactly. So that scenario is not real. But yeah, I tend to think that, I don't know, if it's me, I'm throwing stuff out the plane. I'm throwing anything superfluous out the aircraft. Just me. I mean, again, I'm trying to think of myself, put myself in his shoes. I don't care. I mean, I'm going to get away with it. I'm about to get away with it, right? I don't care if my briefcase is found. I don't care if they know it was fake at this point. I don't know if they go, oh, this is DB Cooper's suitcase and it has road flares in it. Oh no, I don't care if they find it, right? Who cares? I don't give a crap. So, and again, I think about how awkward it would be to have jumped with the briefcase. I don't think he did. That would have been a strange. I mean, he's already got enough things to deal with the money, right? Why would he jump with the briefcase. I don't know. I think he chunked it. And I think he chunked it just like he probably chunked the dummy chute, you know? So no, the bomb depends on who it is. There's your answer.
Do you think he intended to throw the tie out the back of the plane?
No. Okay. So my thought on the tie is this. Okay. So when a man takes a tie off, what do? We throw it on the bed. You throw it on the nearest thing, right? We just throw a tie down because we're undressing, right? Just so we take a tie off, you put it on the ground, put it on the whatever, a chair. I think Cooper intended to take it and roll it up and put it in his, but it is an instinctual thing to take off a tie and put it on something, right? Just an instinct. It's almost like a reflex. Okay. Whereas the sunglasses, what do we do without thinking about sunglasses when we take them off? We'll put them on our shirt. We'll put them on in a pocket or whatever. That is an instinctual move to remove sunglasses and put them somewhere on your person. So I don't think Cooper even needed to think about it. That's why the sunglasses were on the plane. I don't think he didn't jump with the sunglasses, of course. But I mean, but they weren't on the plane. So he obviously, instinct, reflex, take sunglasses off, put them on your person. A tie, instinct, take it off, throw it somewhere, right? So I think he just did that, and in his haste, just forgot it. I think he probably meant to grab it and just put it in one of his trench coat pockets or whatever, right? But no, man, I don't think he meant to. I don't think he meant to throw it out the aircraft, and he didn't mean to leave it for sure. I mean, no, he took the matches with him. He certainly didn't. He took empty matchbooks with him. He certainly didn't mean to leave his tie, but there's no significance to it. The tie wasn't special to him. But you know what? I will say this: thank God he left the tie on the plane, because if not for the tie on the plane, I mean, the tie particles are fascinating. And I don't like the whole thrift store thing. That's garbage. I mean, I don't have secondhand ties. I don't go to I don't go to the Goodwill to buy a tie, right? That's ludicrous, stupid. I mean, no. That tie was DB Cooper's tie. No, I mean, there's no need to go anywhere to buy a tie. It's garbage. It's a dumb. I hate when people say that. Basically, people saying that are trying to distance themselves from the tie particles. That's a bogus argument, in my opinion. Find a suspect who matches the tie. Don't be so married to your suspect who doesn't match the tie. Have some integrity and realize that the tie was DB Cooper's tie.
Do you think the particles on the tie can lead us to who DB Cooper was?
Yeah, they're weird. I mean, it's a strange mixture of things on there, right? I mean, that's not normal. What's on the tie? That is not a normal. There are things on that tie that you and I will never encounter in our lives. There are chemicals on that tie that we will never, ever, ever come into contact with as long as we live. And so, no, yeah, I mean, that is a unique thing. And yes, it can lead us to Cooper. I'm so grateful for Tom Kay. I'm very grateful for Tom Kay for doing what he's done. He is awesome. And the particles are great. The tie particles are, they're fascinating when you look at them. I mean, there's titanium alloys. There's yttriums on there, bismuth, magnesium, strontium. I mean, it's just these crazy chemicals that, like, this guy must have been. He either like went through a car wash of chemicals, or he was a chemist of some sort, or somebody spilled some contaminated stuff on him. I don't know, but it's a strange tie, and I'm glad that it's not just blank.
As someone that's prosecuted people for crimes, how strange is it that in this case all the forensic work was done by a civilian?
Well, okay, so I think that has to do with the timing of it, right? I mean, these things weren't available when they were hot and heavy, right? And that's something that I want to ask Larry about. I'd love to ask Larry, when did the Cooper case become a hobby case? Like, at what year did people stop caring? Because DB Cooper wasn't Larry's only case, right? When did DB Cooper stop being somebody's only case, essentially? When did it become just like whatever? Because it did become a whatever at some point. Larry was doing other things for the FBI, not just Cooper. I assume.
Yeah, he was. But I mean, going through the FBI files, you could see. I saw this memo. I think it was Flyjack pointed it out, and it's like 77 or 78, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna have a meeting about Cooper next week," Anyone with new ideas, we'd appreciate it. We're not really sure where to go at this point.
I think I have seen that. Yeah, I've seen that one. It's cool. Yeah, it's like we're out of leads. What do we do now? And that may have been when they go, screw it. I mean, at some point there was like, whatever, because again, nobody died. There's nobody screaming for justice. If Cooper had killed somebody, it'd still be on somebody's desk right now. Absolutely. Because there's still family who are pissed off about it, right? There's nobody outside the FBI office with a sign picketing saying, oh, why'd you close the case? Why'd you close the case? Justice for Northwest Orient, nobody's doing that, right? So I think the timing of it is like what civilians can do now is light years ahead of what they could have done during the heyday of the Cooper investigation, right? They would not have had that sort of ability to do that. Now, I do believe that they had the ability to look at, like, at the time, pollens and things. I do think that they had the ability to look at clothing. They did what they could. And speaking of Cooper evidence, I actually was doing some research on the hair, trying to find the slide. Okay, because that hair still exists. That was not destroyed. The cigarettes apparently were destroyed. There's several documents pertaining to that. The slide, as far as I can tell, is at Quantico, I think, or maybe it was in the evidence in Seattle. Me and Nikki Broughton spent a full day looking at this stuff, tracking through the 302s. Because here's the damnedest thing: the FBI would send the DB Cooper hair sample. So, say for example, if Dallas, Texas had a suspect, and they had a hair sample from a suspect, right? They would send the DB Cooper hair sample to Dallas. I'd be like, no, you send that dude's hair to us, right? But they would send the DB Cooper hair sample to these places. It's like, whoa, what are they doing? And they're like, make sure you send it back to us. You'll see that, like, oh, send it back when you're done. So DB Cooper's hair covered a lot of miles during the investigation, a lot of truck miles. Okay. Now, one lead we came to was there was a suspect out of Jackson, Mississippi. So I'm in Jackson, Mississippi. That's my home base. Okay. And Jackson is the capital. For those who don't know geography of Mississippi. So there is a big FBI office in Jackson. Okay. And we thought that the hair sample, for a second, I thought was in Jackson. So, like, I was like following the lead, and like Seattle had sent the hair, or no, Vegas. It was Vegas. Vegas had the hair because Vegas had the evidence, basically, because that's where I guess the plane landed. I guess so. Vegas had the Vegas office had the hair. They had the cigarettes. They had the physical evidence from the plane. Okay, so Vegas sends it to Jackson, Mississippi, and like it seems to like dead end there. And I was like, oh my god. I literally got in my car and started driving downtown. Because I was like, that is 5 miles away from me. I got in my car, I drove down there, I tried to talk to, there was an FBI agent that I used to deal with, who I was friends with, and I was like, hey, is he still here? And they're like, no. I was like, oh man. So like I got back in my car and I came back to my office all dejected, and then I saw a little thing where it was like, Jackson sent it to Washington, D.C. Jackson, Mississippi did not send it back to Vegas. They sent it to like D.C. And I believe that's where it stayed. So the last lead is not Jackson. The last lead is that the hair is in D.C., I believe. I think I'm remembering that right. But it's all foggy to me because I had a panic attack. I was like, oh my God. Cooper's hair is here. So like I was panicking. I was like, oh my God. I literally jumped out of my office and just jumped in my car and drove as fast as I could to the FBI office. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, I found his hair. But no, it ended up in DC. So I was close.
Boy, if we could find that.
God, it's there. It's somewhere. Nobody destroyed a glass slide. And it's, even destroying the cigarettes is like, but the FBI destroys a lot of things. Apparently, I'll talk to Larry about this. So like they have a policy where they destroy files after a certain amount of years or after they've used it or something. Like they it's interesting. So Dallas, there was a lead out of Dallas. When I was tracking the hair, there was a suspect out of Texas that the Dallas office had. The Dallas office had to find an old newspaper to figure out what day the hijacking happened. This is in like 1982. they're like, we consulted a local paper from that time to figure out what day the hijacking was. We're like, what? Because they had destroyed their Cooper files. So apparently, I guess they destroyed their files to make room for other files, I guess, because this is before the digital age. I guess they would have too much paper in an office, I suppose. So like they would destroy files that were sent to them that were like copies, I guess, right? The original files would be in the Seattle office or whatever, right? Or Portland or wherever, right? But these files, so they were like, the thing says our Cooper file was destroyed in 1975 or whatever. So we had to find a local paper to figure out what day the hijacking happened to cross-check it with this guy who said he did it or whatever, right? So like, I'm like, man, the FBI didn't even know what day it happened, and 10 years later. It's like,
pretty embarrassing.
Yeah. I'm like, come on. So I found that. So no, if we could find that hair, man, that'd be it. That'd be the thing. But I don't know, man. I don't know if we need the hair. I think that there's a possibility that the tie could lead us to somebody who is Cooper, and maybe there's things that, I just wonder if what I was thinking today about this. Somebody threw away D.B. Cooper's suit, and I bet that D.B. Cooper, if he lived, he kept his suit in his closet. This is the suit I jumped. This is my memento, right? I jumped with this suit, and I guarantee you, whenever he died, somebody came to throw Grandpa's stuff away or give it to Goodwill, and D.B. Cooper's suit probably ended up getting stuffed in a black bag, in a black garbage bag. It's my thought. I bet D.B. Cooper's suit ended up being stuffed into a black garbage bag and dumped at Goodwill or thrown in the trash when Papaw died. That's what I think.
That's a sad ending to that suit.
It is. I had that thought. I was like, oh man, this is depressing. His suit ended up in a trash bag when Cooper died, probably, as an old man.
Do you think this will ever be solved?
Yes, I do. Heck yeah. I think that enough time has passed that if somebody knows something, they may have waited till he died to come out and say, hey, this is my grandfather just, I don't know. I guess we're almost past that point now. Because most of these guys who were Cooper suspects, if you look at them, they end up, Petey died a couple years ago, right? Peterson died, 2019 or something? Or
something like that, 2018, 2019.
Yeah. So, he's the one who, of that generation, I guess, outlived them all, I guess. Kenny died, early 2000s. Dwayne dies in the 90s. Gossett dies in like 02 or 03. So it's been enough years where the idea that, we're waiting for Grandpa to die to go tell the press or something. I heard a good quote. Nikki told me a good quote from a Coast to Coast episode where, I don't know what it was. It was Colbert. Colbert was on Coast to Coast recently. He was still grifting for Rackstraw. It's like, let it go, dude, let it go. But he was on Coast to Coast recently, and one of the Art Bell or whoever it was like, not Art Bell. Art Bell died 20 years ago. George Norrie or whoever it was says, I think the answer to many of the greatest mysteries are found in shoeboxes in attics. I was like, that's true. How many valuable things were again the suit, right? How many things were thrown out when Grandpa died? This is Grandpa's stuff, right? I used to see this stuff on eBay. I used to buy all this World War II stuff on eBay. I liked World War II memorabilia. People were selling their grandfather's World War II uniforms and stuff. I'm like, oh my God. So like, I used to buy all this stuff on eBay because I felt bad. I'm like, man, that was your grandpa's or your dad's, medals and things. What are you doing? Why are you getting rid of this? So I bought a lot of stuff on eBay, just people getting rid of Papaw's stuff. And it's sad. So who knows? There might have been a D.B. Cooper 20 tucked inside of a book. And D.B. Cooper's snot-nosed 10-year-old grandson was like, ooh, money, and took it and spent it somewhere, right? And Cooper's like, oh, man, the 120 I kept as a memento, my little Bart Simpson grandkid took it to the arcade, right? That's plausible, right?
Certainly.
So that's what I'm thinking, is that maybe the answers we need have already been in a landfill somewhere, sadly. That's what but I do think it's going to get solved. Science is getting to a point where the tie is a great lead, but maybe we'll find the slide at some point. Maybe, I don't know. I guess it just takes somebody with some gumption to look around at Quantico for the FBI stuff. I believe Cooper's stuff is on display, isn't it?
Some of it, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that slide is somewhere. I mean, so I don't know. It's somewhere. So they just need to find the slide and we can solve it. I mean, Golden State was solved with DNA, right? So, it's possible that, well, I mean, yeah, we would have solved Cooper ages ago if we had the DNA. And I don't trust the DNA. It sounds weird, but I don't know if I trust the DNA on the tie. I mean, it's from 4 different people, and isn't Tom K one of them?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe Carol's DNA is on there too. I mean, who knows? Larry Carr's DNA might be on there. I would hope that they've cross-checked to make sure that Larry's not dead, because Larry handled it several times. So I don't know if any of that is Cooper's DNA, right? So that's why when they're like, we can rule out people with the Cooper DNA, I'm like, can you? I don't think so, because if you've got 4 people on there, that's a lot of contamination. How can you be certain that it's Cooper's? That one of these is Cooper's? You can't.
Yeah, I think we've proven you can't use the DNA on the tie.
No, it's not good. It's garbage. So, the tie is going to give us some other things, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see.
On that note, is there anything I didn't ask you, Ryan? Anything you're waiting to talk about?
Oh gosh. Let's see. I've discussed. Oh, yes. One other thing I found out. We have been misspelling Alice Hancock's name for 51 years now. Alice Hancock. Alice is spelled with a Y. I found that out. I was like, oh, I was trying to find pictures. So Alice Hancock. I used to have a joke that if you've seen Monty Python, like the Holy Grail, it's like, there's the guy at the beginning, Sir not appearing in this film. I used to have a joke that Alice Hancock was like, Sir not appearing in this hijacking. He's like, she's kind of like I heard somebody call her the Michael Collins of the hijacking, whereas Flo and Tina are the Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin of the crew, and she's the Michael Collins, right? She's the third wheel. Alice is the third wheel. So we have no images of Alice, right? So we have an image of Alice at one of the press conferences from a distance. It's not a very good picture. So I went on a quest recently. I was like, I'm gonna find a picture of Alice Hancock. So I'm gonna see what this girl looks like. So I went on Ancestry.com and I found her like yearbook photos and things, and she's beautiful. She was a pretty woman for sure. But her name was Alice with a Y. And you'll see it also listed as Alice Garley Hancock. Garley is her maiden name. So you'll see in the early FBI files, they'll say Alice Garley Hancock. Because Alice had only been married about a month when the hijacking happened. She was married in October of 71 to, I think his name was Jim Hancock. He was a pilot, I think, maybe with that airline. I think it was a pilot. But
stewardess marrying an pilot? Yeah, that's shocking.
Never happens. So no, but so it was always Alice Garley Hancock. But in her yearbook and everything, it's Alice with a Y, AlYce, Gorley Hancock, Gor, not Garley. So I'm like, holy crap. So not only was I able to find a good picture of Alice, I posted it on the Facebook page and on the Drop Zone, I think. But also her name is spelled AlYce. But it's possible though that she changed it. At least, she's from a small town in Texas. She might have thought that Alice with a Y is rednecky or something, because her marriage license to her husband, which I found online when I was looking for her picture, is Alice with an I. So Alice. So she may have changed it for, to not be so confusing. Because I've never seen Alice with a Y. Maybe you've seen Alice with a Y, but I've never seen Alice with a Y. So
I don't think I have.
Yeah. So I discovered Alice is with a Y. So, and she is still alive, and she's around. But yeah, thanks for having me, man.
No problem. If someone wants to tell you don't know what you're talking about, or all your ideas are great and awesome, is there somewhere they can reach out, talk to you?
Yes, they can find me on the Facebook page. And also I am on Drop Zone and DB Cooper Forum and Twitter as Ole Miss Cub. I went to Ole Miss for undergrad and law school. So and I like the Cubs, Chicago Cubs for some reason. I don't know why, but I wish I didn't. But I am Ole Miss Cub. So they can find me on Twitter, or they can find me currently arguing with Flyjack on Drop Zone about random things.
And the Facebook group is the DB Cooper Mystery Group.
Mystery Group, and it's a great group, and we have a lot of experts on there who really know their Cooper, and you'll find some cool photos on there. And I like to post cool photos I come across. And yeah, so we're good, man.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Ryan. I appreciate it.
You can find Ryan on the DB Cooper Mystery Group on Facebook or on the Drop Zone and DB Cooper Forum under the username Ole Miss Cub. What is up with this guy being a Cubs fan? Do you know who DB Cooper was? Did your aunt drive the getaway car? Is your relative considered a suspect and you'd like to defend his honor? Hit us up. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or email us dbcooperpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you to Ryan Burns for correcting all the mistakes on the DB Cooper Wikipedia page. Thank you to Russell Colbert for correcting all the mistakes on the DB Sweeney Wikipedia page. Thank you to Darren Osadich for letting us use his amazing music. I'm Darren Schaefer, and thank you for listening to the Cooper Vortex.
Story we all know about a man many years ago, hijacked a plane so we were told, then he jumped into the cold. A rapper burning and a cigarette, in the air the stage is set, polite and kind the people say, it's time to make his getaway. This is how the story goes about the money and the man. DB Cooper, they call me now. Catch me if you can. Rolled up in his coat-built tie, he's got enough to change his life. Where he landed, no one knows, but from his tale a legend grows. Was a cold, dark, rainy night. As he walked, he saw light. Held his cash close to his side. He just needs to catch a ride. This is how the story goes about the money and the man. DB Cooper, they call me now. Catch me if you can. Went down to the bone, looked for a place to use the phone. Little cafe outside of town. He walked in, he just sat down. Met a man with a cowboy hat, who told a friend right where he's at. Into the night he disappeared, and from that night a legend reared. This is how the story goes about the money and the man. DB Cooper, they call me now. Catch me if you can. 40 years, the secret's out. The story has been told. DB Cooper's done running now. He was 80 years old.